Good morning, everybody. So I'm the worst public speaker, so I apologize for that in advance. I'm going to do my best here. But before I introduce our morning keynote speaker, Councilman Plias, we have a few comments. My name is Deanne Cuellar, and together with Amanda and Jordana, we tri-chaired this year's convening with the Digital Inclusion Alliance of San Antonio. And we're so glad to have you here this morning. This year's theme is Connect Todos, Digital Inclusion and Upward Mobility. This year's speakers will present new data, discuss policy solutions, demonstrate broadband access gaps, and talk about gathering community input. If you registered online, you might have read some of the questions we're trying to answer today. How do we solve the digital divide in San Antonio? And with this overwhelming mountain of a challenge, where do we begin? Today, we're here to start a conversation. Before I introduce our morning keynote, I'd like to do a little housekeeping. We will have 10-minute breaks in between all of our panels. We'd like for you to use this time to meet with one another, stretch, and visit the organization's tabling today with us. We have 2 rooms reserved outside of the ballroom, Pecan and Magnolia. And that's for those of us that need space today to meet with one another or catch up on work. We also have a drawing going on for our digital inclusion t-shirts that were made possible by Google Fiber. You can get one of these shirts if you add yourself on to our page, the Digital Inclusion Alliance of San Antonio on Facebook, and use the hashtag Connect Todos. Today's summit is sponsored by Hulu, the City of San Antonio Library Foundation, the San Antonio Public Library, and the San Antonio Housing Authority. We are also being recorded by Nowcast SA, and all of today's summit will be available online after today. This morning, you'll also hear a little bit about the city's ongoing technology survey and our 3 innovation zones. And if you'd like to learn more about the survey, please visit sanantonio.gov/smartsa. So joining us this morning is Councilman Manny Plias. Councilman Plias was elected to represent San Antonio District 8 in June of 2017. And I've had the humble honor of being able to sit with Councilman Plias, who chairs the Innovation and Technology Council. And I feel like, I'm saying this often, but I really feel like Councilman Plias is working me out of a job. I love the way he includes people in this conversation, all people, whether you're a lawyer or someone working on a program like Connect Home, or if you're a constituent having problems with their bill, he includes everybody. He brings urgency to our work, and he holds people accountable. So please welcome Councilman Plias.
Thank you, ma'am. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm really excited to be with you. And I'll tell you, a year and a half ago, if somebody told me, let's get you talking about the digital inclusion and the digital divide and closing that very, very disturbing gap that exists, I would have said, well, that sounds lame. I'm not interested in that. That's not what I'm all about. I didn't run on that issue. I got to tell you, I knocked on doors, thousands of doors when I ran for office, and I knocked on them and I said, what is important to you, San Antonio, in my district? And they said, traffic. Traffic, 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 traffic. I said, okay. What else is important to you? We don't want any more apartments nearby here because traffic. And I said, okay, I get it. And I said, what else? Job creation. Let's create some jobs. I'd like to bring in companies like Hulu, who is one of our sponsors and who set up a shop in District 8 up on the north side and has created hundreds of jobs. Thank you to Hulu for sponsoring, and thank you for choosing San Antonio. And I said, we need to get more jobs, high-paying tech jobs, with innovation. And most of the people whose doors I knocked on were like, yeah, that's not something we're into. And I was like, really, why not? And they would tell me, well, that just means more people, more traffic. So what about this traffic thing? And it's funny, right? I'm not trying to be funny, but that's really what they're most worried about. And that's the north side of San Antonio, okay? These are people, and when I said, no, but good jobs is what San Antonio is going to need in order to thrive, and most of them would say, look, I already got a job. I don't need more jobs, right? I need you to figure out, seriously, I would get this all along. I need you to do two things. If I vote for you, I need you to promise me that you and the chambers of commerce and the city of San Antonio and all the different groups out there and advocacy groups will stop telling companies from outside of San Antonio that we're open for business. These are smart people, homeowners, taxpayers, voters who are sick and tired of it. And I was like, okay, and what is the other thing? And they said, and if they do come here, I need you to move them to the south side. And I was like, why? And why? And they were like, because traffic, and it's killing us, and traffic, right? And so those are the priorities on my side of town. Quite frankly, the connection between the digital divide, right, and this issue of digital inclusion and how it impacts their day-to-day life is something they haven't quite figured out yet, right? And to be honest, I didn't know about it either. I'm just a lawyer. I represent homeowners and I represent companies and, insurance claims, and I'm in court duking it out over, quite honestly, things that don't matter as much as the things that we're discussing today. And I was guilty of being ignorant, and I own that. So I want to tell you, and I promise you I'll tell you why I'm so concerned about this, because what I've figured out is what I'm hoping that a lot of more people on my side of town figure out, and that is that there is a direct relationship to their ability to continue thriving if other people in San Antonio also have what they have, which is access to information. That's it. That's really what we're talking about, is access to information. So speaking of information, my job is to have difficult conversations, right? And that's the one thing I promised everybody, and that is sometimes I will push you to think about things that make you uncomfortable. And this morning, for example, I was having a very, very deep conversation. It was, at 8 a.m. in the morning about the topic of direct proportionality, indirect proportionality, and Newton's first law of motion, right? I mean, seriously, this was in the car, and I'm driving down I-10, and I'm having this conversation, and I'm really into it, right? And remember the Newton's first law was an object that stays, an object at rest stays at rest, right? And I'm having this conversation with an 11-year-old, with my daughter. Because last night her older brother, is now taking physics, and this is the thing that they're working on, right? Forces, weight, speed, velocity, and Newton's first law and Newton's second law. And she's in the car, and she's like, I don't get it. What is this thing, proportionality? And please explain it to me like I'm 11 years old. That's her words, right? And I said, okay, well, I'll try. Right, and here I am kind of going back and forth, and I promise you this is how it ended up. And I said, all right, imagine if you're pushing a swing, right, and along comes a kid, and you're pushing this kid, and you use a certain amount of force, right, and you use the most force you can muster up, Sophia, her name is Sophia, and and you push that kid. How high is that kid going to get? And she goes, well, pretty high if I can push it, because I push the kids at my school, and there's a swing. And I was, okay, great. And I was like, now imagine a big fat guy shows up, right, and he sits in the swing too, and you're pushing him with the exact same amount of force. What's going to happen? And she says, well, he's not going to go as fast, he's not going to go as high. And I was like, exactly. And that is, and that sort of led us into proportionality and direct relationships and all that. And she stops and she goes, all right, but I think it's wrong. And I said, Willie, what's wrong with it? And she goes, what if everybody were fat? And I said, what does that mean? And she goes, what if nobody knew that there was such a thing as skinny, right, or little? What if? And she goes, would we still be talking about the same thing? And I said, all right, we're here at school, get out of my car. And so, but it got me to thinking, right? What if nobody knew their place in the world, right? I mean, isn't that at the end of the day what allows us to sort of be who we are and find our place and know whether or not we're performing on par, whether or not we're competitive, whether or not, we've got what we need. So here's some examples of things that worry me. When I got to the city and I talked to Cheryl Scully, by the way, I don't know if you guys noticed, I'm riffing, and so I really have no notes here. Sorry, Andrew. He wrote up some really great talking points for me, but I got to the city, my first day at City Hall, there's a river barge parade where they, everybody claps for you and they give you your parking pass and they say, you're a city council person, don't screw it up, right? And they say, what are your agenda, councilman? And I'd read an article and I was like, there's this real cool buzzword called resilience that everybody's using now in city and municipal governance. And I said to Cheryl Scully and to Ron Nirenberg, I was like, what are we doing as far as resiliency? Because I keep hearing both of you talk about this equity lens, right? And the equity lens is making sure that everybody's got a fair playing field, everybody's got equal opportunities, and that everybody is, that nobody is discriminated against on the basis of, their socioeconomic standing or race, ethnicity, religion, gender, et cetera. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, well, resilience, right? I mean, resilience is something everybody's talking about. I'm reading more and more about it. And they said, well, what are you talking about? We've got a sustainability office where we, do green stuff and we keep an eye on climate, changes, and we talk about recycling and clean air and all that. I was like, no, I'm talking about something different, right? Resilience, big R, right? Big R resilience is our ability to withstand an acute shock like Hurricane Harvey, right? And then, be able to dust ourselves off and keep on thriving like a city should and making sure that we deliver basic services. And then there's little r, which is, how do you thrive in the face of very, very small challenges, right? Like, I don't know, traffic, right? Like the heat, like clean water issues, like, the day-to-day struggles that we've all got. And they said, yeah, that sounds really interesting, Councilman. So have you heard about our sustainability office where we do all this other stuff? And I was like, look, I'm serious, right? We've got this equity lens, but we don't have this resilience lens. And they said, all right, well, give us an example. And I was like, okay, here's one. How many seniors do we have in San Antonio who don't have access to the internet, right? Or who don't even know how to use it, even if they do have access to it? And in the face of Hurricane Harvey or the next hurricane, wouldn't get our digital get out of town messages, or we're evacuating this neighborhood message, or these are the low water crossing messages, right? Because that's how we communicate to the public now, by the way. We communicate to them by Nextdoor and Facebook, right? And we're really proud of ourselves at the city, and we're doing a good job, right? Our SA Speak Up initiatives and our citizen engagement is all around, this ability for people to access this flow of information that goes back and forth. But what if these folks don't have that access? And they said, okay, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, do you know where they live? Do we have an inventory of where these seniors live? Because if they don't have the information, it's time to evacuate. It's incumbent upon us to go pick them up then, right? I mean, if our information's not getting to these vulnerable populations, and they were like, oh yeah, no, we don't have an inventory of those people. And I said, okay, well, what about when it's time for inoculation season, right? The flu is upon us, and we are giving away free flu shots so that people don't get sick, and in turn, that ends up being contagious. Are we telling people in a way that doesn't include the digital vehicle where to find those shots and how to get life-saving, and oftentimes it's life-saving, how to access this life-saving vaccination? And they were like, well, the traditional way, we'll mail it to them. And I said, okay, that's one way of doing it, right? The other way of doing it is figuring out where those people live and then taking the information to them. And you know what? I used those people. Those were the words I kept using, those people, those people. And those people are San Antonians. Those people are the ones that work in our restaurants. Those people are the ones who are our neighbors. Those people are the ones who send their kids to our schools. Those people pay taxes, and yet those people are not even getting spoken to by their own city, and not even in regards to goofy things like, hey, here's our tricentennial celebration, come out for the parade, but life-saving things, right? That's really disturbing, and that made me mad. And Craig Hopkins is here, and he'll tell you that I do get mad. Craig Hopkins is our chief technology officer at the city. And so I've been making noise. I've been making a lot of noise about resilience and innovation and technology and how that needs to not just be about, this burgeoning cybersecurity industry and attracting really, really cool jobs, right? But that it needs to also be about making sure that we're taking care of vulnerable populations, right? Like my dad and my mom and my in-laws, right? Who they finally, in 2018, have figured out how to program their VHS. But that's about as far as they've gone. And I get called every single night on how to use this app and how to use that app, and my phone is ringing this way and not that way. And, I've got seniors in San Antonio who are high earners who aren't able to access very important information. And our seniors are living longer and longer and longer and longer. And now when somebody tells me, remember back, 20 years ago, they're like, well, my grandmother passed away. Oh, really? How old was she? She was 95. Whoa, that was a long time. And now somebody says to you, well, my grandmother passed away. She was 95. You're like, wow, that's really young. How did that happen? And that phenomenon has some direct consequences because I'm now having this growing population of seniors who are functionally tech illiterate. And yet we're living in a world, and you're about to sit through a panel, of very smart people, including Craig and Renee Dominguez, who are going to tell you that the city of San Antonio is morphing into a smart city, a digital city, a city that has a relationship with you by way of your preferred digital device. How do you live in a city that is smart if you yourself aren't literate and can't understand what your city is trying to tell you? That's really dangerous. And so I'll get really geeky with you in a second, and then I'll stop because this is really a downer. I read recently, have you all read, do you guys remember in college, if you had to take some literature classes, you had to read these really boring and difficult books by a fella named Kafka? Anybody ever read anything by Kafka? That is one grouchy guy. And everything he did was just so depressing. But he wrote this really interesting parable, right? Where it's called The Gatekeeper, and it's basically a guy. And he wants to access information. He wants to access the law. And he walks up to this gate, and there's a gatekeeper standing in front of him, a really imposing, kind of intimidating fella. And he heads for the gate, and the gatekeeper says, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you through here. And he goes, well, why not? And he goes, well, you don't have the password, or you don't know, how to get in here. You don't have the key, right? And the guy's like, well, where do I get the key? And he goes, look, I'm just a gatekeeper. I'm not the key finder, right? So I'm not going to tell you where to get the key, but I'm still not going to let you in. And the guy looks past the gatekeeper, and he sees that beyond the gate, there's a lot of light, right? And Kafka's trying to tell us that that's where illumination is, right? And that's where sort of a better life is, information, if you will. And he waits, and he waits, and he waits, and he keeps asking the gatekeeper, is it time now? And he goes, no, it's not time now. I'll let you know when it's time, unless, of course, you got the key and you know how to get in. And he says, okay, I'll wait. And he waits, and he waits, and he waits days, and he waits weeks, and he waits years until he turns into an old man. And every single day he's asking the gatekeeper, can I get in now? Well, can you at least tell me what the question is? Can you give me a hint, right? And the gatekeeper's like, look, man, I can't give you a hint. I really can't. I can just sit here in front of the gate until you come up with a right set of, and combination of words to get you in. And on the very, very end of his life, on the last day, he asks the gatekeeper, like, seriously, like, what's your problem? Why couldn't I get in here this entire time? And the gatekeeper was like, look, it's not my problem. It was really your problem all along. Sorry for your bad luck, and the dude dies, right? And this is not the kind of story you want to read to cheer you up at night, right? But the lesson Kafka was teaching us way back then, hundreds of years ago, was that, information is illumination, right? And that we are handicapped. And that there's multiple gates in front of us that are put there either by ourselves or by our community or by the man and the system, right? But the gates exist, and if you can't access those, well, then you're handicapped. And you will always stay where you are, and an object at rest stays at rest, right? And I was reading this, and I was thinking about this digital inclusion, conference that we're at today, and it occurred to me that there really are gates out there that we as a system and as a group of people have helped propagate and continue to keep closed, whether you want to or not. We all have a part to play in that. And so here's a question. Let's say Barnes & Noble and Amazon showed up one day and said, no, 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 no. No more of these libraries that are run by communities, and no more of these bibliotheques, right, giving away books because, well, how are we supposed to make money if you guys are going around giving away books and giving away access to books, right? How ludicrous would that sound to, I mean, that sounds ludicrous on its face. That sounds kind of obscene, right? Don't give people access to libraries because we can't make a buck. That is literally what a very powerful group of ISPs and tech companies in Washington and Austin have done. They have said, please, whatever you do, do not let municipalities give access to the public to information, because if you do give it away, then we don't make any money. That's perverse. That's obscene. That's not the way it works. And yet we sit by and we're comfortable in this room, right? Because our biggest problem is traffic. So I got to tell you, the mayor, my city council, Cheryl Scully, they finally were as alarmed as I am. And we put together a committee for digital inclusion, cybersecurity, innovation, technology, resilience. And here's something really cool. For the first time in the history of San Antonio, one of those city council committees has non-elected officials on it. Deanne Cuellar sits on that committee with us. Dirk Elmendorf, one of the founders of Rackspace, sits on that committee with us. Will Garrett, another brilliant mind, big thinker in the world of tech and innovation and cybersecurity, sits on that committee. And you know what we talk about all day long is, are we doing enough to make sure that the little bit of information that is available to people right now for free, it continues to stay available? Are we doing enough to knock down those gates that I talked about earlier? Are we doing enough to raise awareness, right, of the problem and the relationship, the direct proportional relationship that it has between job creation, health, access to life-saving services, right? And the answer is no, we're not doing enough. And we can always do more. And so I'm here to tell you that the city of San Antonio, the 7th largest city in the United States, the fastest growing municipality in the country, did I get that right? The fastest growing municipality in the country is really doubling down and dedicated to closing this divide. Because if Washington's not going to do it, and if Austin's not going to do it, then somebody's got to be leading, right? And we're doing that. And so I'm happy to report San Antonio Housing Authority now has invented on its own and innovated on its own a new way to provide information and close that gap by way of these little solar panels and mesh networks that are going to be installed at the Casiano homes. That's really a big deal. That's a very important deal, because for the first time, those people who live in these homes, who never ever dreamt that they'd have access to this screaming fast broadband flow of information, finally do. And you know what information they can finally get to that they've never been able to get to before? Job boards. Information about health. Information about their own kids' homeworks and grades. They're able to email their teachers. Ways to access, I don't know, information on the battered women's shelter. Ways to find out where it is their closest police substation is. That's basic stuff that all of us take for granted, and we're finally in 2018 making that available to those people on the south side. It's too late. We should have been doing this a long time ago, but I'm happy we're doing it today. And we're doing it today because you are here, and you're helping, and you're the wind in the sails. So thank you to everybody who's here. If all of you want to get briefed a little bit more on Kafka, I'm going to be in that corner over there. I wish all of you to have a very, very successful conference, and I hope that this conversation that you guys have today leads you to tougher conversations, but really powerful solution. So thank you, Deanne. I appreciate you inviting me. And I'm going to hand the mic off to whoever's next, because I'll keep talking, I swear. This is the part where I hand the mic off to whoever's next. Or I can drop the mic. I can drop the mic. All right, thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys letting me be here today. Bye.
Hello? All right, really quickly, we're going to move on to our next panel. They're going to set up something really quickly. The next session is Setting the Stage, Why Should San Antonio Be a Smart City? And our moderator for this panel is Christina Basel from Univision. Can y'all help me welcome Christina with some applause? I feel like we need to wake up this morning. Drink all the coffee.
Good morning, and I believe Jordana's going to speak, but I just wanted to say good morning. You're going to start?
We thought there was a big speech.
I know. Oh, okay. Well, I'll give you a...
Renee, get me some coffee while you're back there.
Well, I'm excited to be here, and I don't know about you, but I went to the wrong center earlier, but I'm glad that I made it in with early enough time to be here on time, but I was over on Fredericksburg and 410. Did anybody of you do that? Okay, I don't feel silly, thank you. But now I know there's two centers that we could use for other events, right? That's what I learned. Well, I'm honored to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation. As I spoke to Jordana last night, I actually learned a lot, and I'm hopefully that Univision could be a part of this somehow. I know that we do radio and TV, but we are also getting into the digital era as well, and so I'm going to, I know Jordana, you wanted to start with a presentation before we begin, or do you just want us to?
Yeah, that could just be our first order of business, just to get everybody into the language that we're using today.
Okay, but before we begin, do you want to talk, well, let me introduce Jordana first. Senior advisor at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas San Antonio branch, supports the Federal Reserve System's economic growth objectives by promoting community and economic development and fair and impartial access to credit. Her focus area includes the Community Reinvestment Act, community development finance, digital inclusion, financial education, affordable housing, workforce development, and small business development. Jordana is the lead author of Las Colonias and the 21st Century Progress Along the Texas-Mexico Border, and the author of Closing and Digital Divide, a framework for meeting CRA obligations. Telehealth, a tool for addressing persistent health challenges of Texas-Mexico border. In 2018, she received the Federal Policy Champion Award from the Coalition of Local Internet Choice and the Community Broadband Hero of the Year by the National Association of Telecommunication Officers and Advisors. She grew up in rural South Texas, community of Benavides, and she holds an MPA from Harvard and John F. Kennedy School of Government. Amazing.
Thank you.
Rene Dominguez has served as the Director of Economic Development Department for the City of San Antonio since June 2010. His primary responsibility is to provide strategic, administrative, and pragmatic direction and oversight of the Economic Development Department, which includes industry development, small business, workforce development, international relations, and business development. Rene previously served as Assistant International Economic Development Director. Prior to coming to the city in 2009, he was the president of the Community Development Loan Fund and a certified CDFI whose mission is to provide economic development and small business growth. He's from El Paso, and he attended St. Mary's University.
But next to Jordana, that sounds like nothing compared to, she came with a PowerPoint and went to Harvard. Making us look bad, Jordana.
Women have to.
There you go. I like it.
Craig Hopkins comes from the Information Technology Department, a team from the, with more than 20 years of experience at USAA, leading efforts in customer service, digital transformation, corporate strategy, information technology, procurement, and innovation. Prior to his time to with USAA, Craig served 4 years in the U.S. Coast Guard and later became a military spouse, while his wife Trish served 11 years in the U.S. Navy and Japan. He has a master's in business administration and a bachelor's degree in business administration as well. So amazing work. I just am here to say hello again. So I'm going to let you all, Jordana, you want to start?
Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's awesome to be with you today on the stage. And they asked me to kind of lay the foundation for today and for our panel about why San Antonio should be a smart city and what digital inclusion has to do with that. This is just a quote that I'd like to use to get you into the way we're trying to think today. And I'm getting a sign. Okay. So, the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate for the stormy present. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. The way we've approached things in the past is not going to solve the challenges we have today in the 21st century. The tools of the 20th century that we're used to, that we hark back to, are not going to be the answer. That is part of the reason why we have to come together as a community. As technology advances, we need to become more human. What are we good at as humans? It's coming together, partnering to solve problems, rational thinking, analytical thinking, in the face of algorithms that may seem to be controlling our opportunities and the lives of low-income people. How do we become more analytical and have a deeper understanding of what is happening, and how do we guide that technology? Just to give you a sense of the what we're experiencing in our country right now, and certainly in the city of San Antonio, the 7th largest city in the country, we're in the midst of the 4th industrial revolution. And people have been replaced by machines, and technology has advanced through the centuries, right? The machines have taken over labor, and things have changed and caused disruption. But what we have never seen is the pace of change that we're seeing today. And there are many things that we're seeing happening. I'm going to just quickly go over them. Automation in manufacturing, changing manufacturing jobs, and manufacturing jobs shrinking, where a lot of people had access to the middle class through those jobs. E-commerce, changing retail. Those were some other jobs that people could go into. We had many entrances into the middle class, if you will. Artificial intelligence augmenting labor and now replacing labor. Remote models for the provision of services, like in banking, where everything is changing, the way you receive banking services, and we have a lot of innovations. They call it fintech, banks partnering with fintech companies, awesome innovations in banking. However, we're not innovating and reaching low and moderate income people with those innovations. And there's a great opportunity missed if we don't take that on. That's part of digital inclusion. The gig economy, what that means to people's relationship to work, algorithms limiting opportunities. By that I mean, deciding whether you can get insurance or buy a home. And all of that is based on cognitive computing. It's right. It's a big data that spits out a historical perspective. So if it's based on something that's biased or prejudiced, you're going to get that kind of outcome, and people are going to be limited. So we see a massive shift in work. Machines are impacting low and medium skills jobs and replacing human labor. 47% of total U.S. employment is at a high risk of significant automation across blue-collar and white-collar professions. And the question is, and this is one of the biggest we're dealing right now, Councilman Pelais illustrated that well, we're dealing with one of the biggest ethical decisions and challenges of the technological age, and that is, are we going to include people in the digital revolution? Are we going to do everything we can? We had a conference, the Federal Reserve on Workforce Development, and all the futurists were predicting greater and greater wealth and income inequality. And what we're saying in the San Antonio Digital Inclusion Alliance is we don't accept that. We want to intervene because we know how. We've studied the best practices of what we can do and how we can come together with the city, with all of us on the panel and the Digital Inclusion Alliance, and we can change that. We can intervene effectively. And so just to give you a few definitions, the digital divide is the gap between people who have access to broadband services and know how to use the internet and those who do not have such access or knowledge. And who is on the wrong side of the digital divide? As Councilman Pelais said, low-income people, rural populations, those with less formal education, elderly and minorities. And from the new 2016 census, households making $25,000 or less have a broadband adoption rate of 58%, while those making more than $150,000 have an adoption rate of 96%. That includes if you only have a cell phone. So the number for a person that has a cell phone and a computer or other laptop to do all the range of things you have to do, like homework and applying for jobs where you need more than a mobile phone, those numbers are not quite as good. Our households with a broadband subscription across at least 2 devices, 150,000 per year, have a rate of 80%, and under 25,000 a year, the rate is 20%. So that's just a couple of the definitions, and then I just wanted you to see where San Antonio falls. And I normally wouldn't show a slide like this with tiny little numbers, but it's very important for San Antonio and everything that we're talking about the ecosystem for entrepreneurship, everything that we want for the economic development of our city. It really matters. What I show here is the 2016 American Community Survey data that shows, again, the direct correlation between income, area median income of a city, and the access that households have to the internet. So the least connected, Detroit, Michigan is at the top. When I do 50,000 or more households, unfortunately, Brownsville is at the top. So we're talking, and we have some friends from Brownsville here, of the worst connected cities. So it's very directly correlated to income. The lower the area median income of a city, the least access. And San Antonio falls now, number 15, on the bottom third of cities. So you can see, if we want to attract entrepreneurship, if we want to attract business and industry and the tech industry, this is how our fates are intertwined. Low-income people on the wrong side of the digital divide, their fate is intertwined with how effective San Antonio is going to be in being a tech hub, where an HEB will not go and put their innovation center in Austin. They will have it here, right here downtown, and they will be confident that we have a Digital Inclusion Alliance, we have UTSA downtown, we have St. Mary's, all these incredible universities. We have the people, we have the Digital Inclusion Alliance training people in digital skills, Code Up, the Open Cloud Academy, all of that. So we need to move to the, you see Austin is there on the top third. We need to move over, and that's the goal of this group. So I'm going to turn it over now to our other panelists, and we can have a great discussion.
Well, that was amazing information, and with everything that you just gave us, are we ready? Are we ready? Are we a smart city? Can we be a smart city? Yes. Yes? Okay. So, well then, Craig, how do you define a smart city?
It's not being a dumb city. So I always start with that because this smart city tagline is a huge misnomer. And we did a little research and come to find out that smart city was created, the term smart city was created by a vendor who was trying to sell technology. No different than in the private industry if you want to be in a digital transformation or whatever other buzzword you want to use. So I personally would have been on the record for a while saying I'd like to abolish the term smart city because every city already is smart in some way. And being a smart city is not a destination. It's not a final point where you can achieve it. Although the industry has used it that way from a public relations standpoint. So cities like New York, Barcelona, others can declare themselves a smart city with a lot of public relations money. And it's a way to create, I think, some of the things we're talking about, an opportunity for workforce development and bring companies in when you declare yourself that. So here in San Antonio, we're already a smart city. We already do a lot of smart things. But we constantly have to grow, and the purpose here today is to bring everybody with us. And I think we're resetting a lot of things we're doing in our Smart City program to be focused on inclusivity for everyone. Everyone should be part of the digital economy, not just those who have access. Everyone should be part of gathering information, to the councilman's gatekeeper analogy, not just those who have the digital skills. Everyone should be able to start a small business if they choose to, not just those with means. So what we're really focusing on our Smart City program is 3 components that are very special to San Antonio, which may not be special to other cities, but they are to us. One is transportation, as we talked about. But it depends on who you are and where you live. Those civic problems are very different throughout our city. If you're on the north side, your commute on 281 is a bear. If you're on the south side, you're spending 2.5 hours on a bus. Why? So we start to really break down those problems based on personas. We're back to who are the citizens and what are their civic issues. The second theme is around sustainability, clean air, clean water, public safety, those types of things. A smart city will use solutions to make it safer and cleaner as we go forward. And our third component is around access to services. And that's really where this conversation this morning leads us to, but it's across everything we're doing, access to services. Do you trust government? Do you use government services? Are you engaged in government? Do you participate? Do you have feedback? Do you have voice? And can you access the things that all citizens should have access to? So I want to make sure you understand a smart city in San Antonio is going to be very different than other cities because it's about who we are, our bicultural environment, our economic situations, and our geographic layout. And we are not just a suburban center that everybody drives downtown every day, right? We are actually 13 regional nodes that interact with each other in very different communities, so we have to apply that to us. My last point about being smart is it started as Smart City was technology solutions, vendors selling solutions. Everybody wants a smart street light, everybody wants a smart stoplight, everybody wants an autonomous vehicle. Then it emerged to the government, city government stepping in and saying, okay, we're going to then say we're going to do these things in these areas. What it's really emerging to, we call it Smart 3.0, is co-creation with our citizens. doing it with our citizens, understanding the civic challenges to be solved, and including the community in our solution work. Not for technology and design, but people being involved in solving problems. And back to here is how do we get 1.9 million people in our regional area involved in that process, not just those who have access to the internet. So that's a bigger problem that we're trying to work through.
Thank you. Now, Renee, do you share that, or do you have a different perspective?
I mean, all the points they're making are right on, and I'm not an expert in this field. And as I was preparing for this last night, I spent a lot of time trying to unpack exactly what you as an audience would like to hear, what's relevant in terms of what is our city doing. And so I'll kind of break it down in two buckets. It's also really ironic that I'm the one speaking on this. I am the most least technological person in our office, which drives my staff crazy. But the importance of this topic and this issue is certainly number one in our office. It's critical to our whole strategy. So that's where I'll start. But before I start, I see a couple people in the audience. Alex Lopez from the City of San Antonio, our Chief Equity Officer, and also the Assistant Director of Industry. So a lot of the stuff I'm talking about directly, she oversees and impacts. So it's nice to have her here. And then I see Isaac Bernal over here on our industry team as well. So I want to thank them for being here for my team. So from a strategy standpoint, let me just give you a little bit of background in that not only is this a major issue for us in San Antonio and a critical issue for us to solve, but we're actually creating strategies to widen that gap. So solving this issue becomes even more critical. And what I mean by that is for the last 10 years or so, we've refocused our whole economic development strategy to focus on emerging industries and emerging technologies. Jordana kind of hit my main points when she talked about automation and middle skills jobs. Those are the industries that have a significant amount of middle skills jobs within them. And those middle skills jobs are those jobs that don't require a four-year degree, but more than a high school diploma, so a certificate, for example. Our whole economic development strategy is focused on those industries. So IT and cybersecurity are examples of that. Healthcare and biosciences, advanced manufacturing and aerospace. So while this gap is there in terms of the digital divide, we're also advancing ourselves as a community in terms of these industries. And there's a real specific reason why we're doing that. One is we have a competitive advantage in those industries, so that's our best shot. We want to double down on those industries, primarily because they pay higher than average wages. When Jordana was kind of talking about the median income, this is a key strategy to drive our middle income and our wages here in San Antonio. So as we're actively pursuing these industries and growing these industries themselves are changing and creating jobs that are more advanced and require different skill sets, digital skill sets. So that's what I'm alluding to in terms of it's imperative that we not only grow the economy and in essence widen the gap, but really double down on solving this problem because we're making significant headway. Those key industries are growing at a faster rate. Those key industries pay better than average, as I mentioned. And so the majority of the jobs and occupations within those industries, I want to say I saw a stat, Jordana, maybe you can correct me, 87% of the jobs in those industries require some form of digital literacy. So it's critical and imperative that we solve for that and we do both things at once. At a real tactical level, I think it's great that we as a city are pursuing those industries. We as a city are creating strategies to raise our income and be hubs for these 21st century industries. But at the same time, we're also doing some very tactical, transactional things that help solve the problem. And I think as citizens, that's what you want to hear. Well, what are you doing about it now? What are some things that you can do as a department to help solve this issue? So oftentimes when we're meeting with companies to recruit them here, they ask about or digital capabilities. They ask about our workforce. And so it's a constant conversation what we're having, that we're having with these industries. Something that we do often is as we recruit these companies, we incorporate them and include them as part of the conversation. So the Digital Alliance was a beneficiary of one of those projects in that when we recruited Hulu, for example, to San Antonio, part of the agreement we had with them, if we were going to provide them incentives to come to the city, is that they were going to be at the table. They were going to be thought leaders in the discussion. They were going to help us not only financially solve this problem, but also intellectually solve this problem. So from a transactional standpoint, I want to assure you that it's front of mind. We want to not only recruit these companies here, but incorporate them into those discussions and make them part of the solution. I'll hand off the mic now, but I know one missing element of what I'm talking about is how do we go back and then train those citizens that are being left behind. And so later in the conversation, I'm happy to talk to you all about what we're doing specifically. It was kind of what Craig was mentioning, and that is inclusivity. How do we ensure that as our economy grows and thrives, that we are reaching back and ensuring that all our citizens and residents can access that economic growth? We are putting forth some economic development strategies that are based on inclusivity, very specifically related to workforce. So absolutely we have to fix the car while we're driving it, and that's what we're doing in the Economic Development Department.
Wonderful. Thank you, Renee. And I want to go back later on because you said about strategies, but are we implementing also policies is the city implementing policies for this as well? Is that something? Yeah.
I mean, I'll just open
Yeah.
it up because I work with the Federal Reserve, and on behalf of the Digital Inclusion Alliance, the city, as we sought to meet with the city, has been very open to understanding what this asset is that the Digital Inclusion Alliance represents. It's people from many sectors, education, industry, banking, the Federal Reserve, SAHA, the San Antonio Housing Authority, the libraries. It's people that are working to close the digital divide, people that are working, that understand that workforce development, digital inclusion is workforce development because of the economy that we're facing now. So the city of San Antonio sees that asset and formed a very formal relationship with the Digital Inclusion Alliance to mobilize effectively. And one of the things that we have asked for is one of the best practices is make a digital inclusion plan. Let's make a digital inclusion plan as part of our economic development plan of the city. It won't happen unless we're very deliberate. And then you see action by the city moving toward that goal. It was a meeting of the minds, and people seem to understand. We had a lot of evidence, a lot of data to support and experiences to support, and we're going to be able to create great policies that are equity-based policies that bring the resources into the people that need it the most. Because we know that if you solve 20 to 30% of the problem, you'll solve everything if you're very deliberate and direct. So I think it's part of that value system of the city to engage its active, and to engage citizens into solutions and incorporating them, as Craig said, in their strategy.
Awesome.
Can I just give a couple of facts, though?
Absolutely, yes.
So, and I'm still learning this, and there's a lot more to learn, but for those of you who are thinking, well, Craig, and by the way, my IT management team sitting in that back table, everybody wave, just wave, right? So when you say Craig, you're really saying those guys, all right? Why don't you just do what other cities have done and lay fiber to these neighborhoods and light up their houses? That's the easy answer. The city owns hundreds of miles of fiber. CPS Energy owns hundreds of miles of fiber. We're all partners in this, and if the answer is we need fiber and broadband to the home and neighborhoods, then just go lay it in there. And in the state of Texas, we're not allowed by law to do that. Okay? Now there's a whole conversation we could have about the details of that, but in the state of Texas, the city municipal agencies are not allowed by law to provide broadband services for resale in the home. Now, we are allowed to provide free Wi-Fi services, but as Jordana and other people will tell you, the difference between Wi-Fi and broadband are very different things when it comes to digital skills, access to speed, all those types of things. So I don't want you to think either that free Wi-Fi solves this all over the city. As a different constraint. So at a starting point, we have certain rules that as municipal agencies we have to live by until someone smarter than me can help change some of those rules. But there are still ways to solve this problem as a group. The city's responsibility, economic development, using smart technologies, leveraging assets that we can leverage in this conversation, but also our partnerships with telecom providers and many other folks in there. That's probably going to be the primary area of policy and relationship building where we're going to spend our time together, because we're going to solve this as a community. Not just one agency can lay the infrastructure, even if we could afford to do so as we go forward. So I just want to set that as some context for the audience.
That's amazing. Thank you.
I just want to, Jordana nailed it when she said the city in the last few years have moved in a direction that looks at its policies and how to make them more equitable. When you do that, you cannot hide from the fact that a lot of these policies are not impacting the most distressed communities in our community. And so when, as a department, and that's been the mandate from council, is look at your departments and find ways that they're more equitable. Alex is responsible for providing equity assessments in each of the departments. And when you do that and you look at it through a completely different lens, you start determining what are those interventions that are going to be a lot more impactful and inclusive, and therefore drive a whole new level of policy. And that's where the city's at. Just 2 years ago, for the first time, it wasn't necessarily about dividing the budget equally. It was about determining what budget would be more equitable. And so there's been a really big shift in terms of city policy in that regard.
And I just want to say that in closing the digital divide, local governments are critical. That's what we've learned from studying cities around the country. They may not be a provider of broadband like CPS provides energy, but they can invest in fiber optic infrastructure assets and create a win-win situation, basically. They will have the capacity to do public safety and provide for their citizens in many ways, but they make the last mile a lot cheaper. And why have low-income people not been included? We haven't had a plan, and we haven't made it enticing for companies, ISPs, small ones and large ones, to serve those communities by saying, hey, we'll meet you halfway. We are going to invest in our infrastructure so that it's close enough. And don't forget that wireless is not fiberless. It depends on proximity to the fiber optic infrastructure. So that, I just want to say that even though cities have a lot of challenges because of the predominance of the companies in wanting to provide broadband services, and maybe it's not even the best thing for a city to do so, but they do have a lot of leverage in advocating for their citizens and creating the infrastructure. And there are many things. The most exciting thing, I think, when the Digital Inclusion Alliance meets with a city, or Gabriel Garcia and I have met with cities along the border, what happens in the room when you get with city officials, mayors, and IT people, and school districts and so forth, you find out all the value that's left on the table that you could be mobilizing to serve low and moderate income people. That's the power of kind of coming together, because we can bring together what are the laws and regulations and what are the opportunities and best practices. And I think that's what's most exciting, is that cities learn, wow, we can actually solve this.
So if I may just interrupt real quick, who would be the best players at that table to have the most effective plan? Or like you're talking being in the same in that
So
room.
in any city, it would be René Dominguez, the Economic Development Director. It would be Craig, who's in charge of innovation and IT policy for the city. It would be the mayor. It would be the superintendent and maybe his key IT people. In some cases, the county, the economic development director of the county commissioner. That's how, what matters is what these people in decision-making power, policy-making power want. It's not even about the money, because what we're, like the Digital Inclusion Alliance does and the Federal Reserve, is say, hey, we can help you create public-private partnerships to pay for this. We mobilized around the Community Reinvestment Act. There's been millions of dollars just in 1 year going into digital inclusion programs. We want to do much more. But then there's foundations, everybody in our social networks that we can mobilize to be partners in this. So what matters is that they want it, but those are the decision makers that can make policy for the city, and that's who you need at the table.
So we have that to take advantage of today. Jose de la Cruz, who is the Chief Innovation Officer for the City of San Antonio, under this Smart Cities program, we've actually built a collaborative group of municipal agencies, and as far as I know, we are the only city in the U.S. who is going at smart cities this way. The city, CPS, I'm going to forget somebody, I apologize if I do this on the fly. City, CPS, SAWS, VIA, River Authority, Housing Authority, Bear County Appraisal District, and I know there's one more and it's not coming to my head right now. But we have built this collaborative group to do smart cities together, not as individual organizations. That's a basis for what you're talking about, and we need to take advantage of that group as we go forward with the changes we want to put in place.
The only thing I would add is, I mean, obviously, what we're not highlighting is the need for the residents themselves to be at the table, for community-based organizations to be at the table. I mean, I think we'd all agree that that's implied, but it's also extremely critical. So let me take a step back and talk a little bit about sort of the inclusivity issue and in terms of economic development, you know, specifically around workforce, what that means. And it's really that thought process that makes me want to highlight the fact that our organizations and our nonprofits are critical to help us solve these problems. In addition to median income and our wages being sort of one of our Achilles here in San Antonio, our educational attainment rates are also sort of another pain point for us as a community. And so it's the city invests millions of dollars in workforce development, and we work primarily with our community-based organizations or nonprofit organizations. And right now, you know, we've got such a need and not enough resources to really move the needle in terms of just getting people basic literacy, numeracy skills, getting them basic workforce experience, getting them their GED or their high school equivalency. And trust me, these nonprofit agencies, the furthest thing from their mind is, you know, digital literacy. Yeah, it is part of their business plan and it is part of their thought process, but there's such a great need in just sitting down and teaching someone how to read and teaching them how to do math and bringing their skill level up, teaching them soft skills and how to interact with employers. My impression is they tend to be overwhelmed by that, but the reason I mentioned that they need to be at the table is because we need to infuse digital literacy in those activities. It needs to go hand in hand with all that, and a lot of the nonprofits do that, but there's certainly a whole, you know, body of work around increasing the effectiveness of us as a community in terms of providing resources to these distressed communities, to these targeted populations. One thing that we have been doing in terms of strategy and tactics and how can we really move the needle is we really want to leverage the resources we have in terms of economic development and workforce development. We want to maximize the resources we already have dedicated to those efforts. So what we've been working on behind the scenes for the last couple of years is working with all our delegate agencies that provide workforce, getting on one client management system, to get all of our participants, the 4,000 participants we have in these delegate agencies that are learning how to read, getting work experience, getting their GED, getting them on one system so that when someone gets literacy and numeracy training from one agency, they can get handed off to another agency. And that agency would then provide their GED or high school equivalency. And then from that, hand them off to get some work experience. And we've got some great partners doing that. So that is a technical solution. It requires the participants to have some sort of digital capabilities. So again, I'm always amazed at the dynamics that we create in terms of providing a solution, creating a solution, and trying to move the needle, and at the same time not fully addressing the other issues with when you do that. We're trying to be smart, and we're trying to solve for that, and kind of, as I said, fix the car while it's running. So it's not that it's out of sight, out of mind. It's that they both go hand in hand. And so that's my comment about it. Really requires these community-based organizations, these nonprofit agencies, to be at the table, because they're the ones that are going to say, well, I provide this training, but I need additional resources to provide digital literacy. I need to teach my participants, Word and Excel and PowerPoint at the very least. I need to teach them how to turn on their computer and learn about hardware. All those things go hand in hand.
Just one thing. And actually what Renee is describing is what San Antonio has, and has an advantage over many cities, and that is that many of us came together. It's basically nonprofits working at the grassroots, Girls Inc., Youth Code Jam, Saha with Connect Home, Muni Ray Jester. People came together and formed the Digital Inclusion Alliance, and they, working directly on digital skills, training, all the three legs of the stool, right, of broadband adoption and closing the digital divide. We're working on the technology part, but the training and technical assistance. So the Federal Reserve, I have a proposal up to my department that I want to do a survey of all the organizations in San Antonio so that the city can see its assets right there and say, okay, we're mobilizing in this community. These are the best organizations to work with who have expertise in this area. So we'll know what is the expertise for training. Is it elderly? Is it youth? Is it, what age group? And then what is it? And so forth. So we're going to understand our assets very clearly, and that's part of the role of the Digital Inclusion Alliance, is to make what can seem amorphous or invisible, to make it visible and very known so that we can mobilize more effectively.
Thank you, Jordana. And something that you mentioned, Renee, as a former educator, we're always needing resources to teach. Always. Just letting you know. So, well, we're going to stop for a bit and take some questions because we have about 8 minutes left. So I'm going to pass this mic on to Amanda, and we'll take some questions from the floor.
Hi, my name is Rene Gonzalez, and I'm with the Foresight Group. We're an engineering company that does a lot of fiber optic planning and feasibility and design and construction. And I come from a traditional infrastructure world: water, wastewater, electric, roads, bridges. That's a very planning-based approach. It includes the community, it includes feedback, it includes putting CIP money, resources allocated to a long-range plan. It's kind of echoing off of what Ms. Barton was saying. How critical do you guys think that treating broadband as the next utility in a planning mindset and framework, how do you think that would kind of solve a lot of the problems that you're talking about, engage with the community, putting the money there, and also exploring the legalities, kind of like was also mentioned between Mr. Hopkins and Ms. Barton, where like the city of Salina had an attorney general opinion that basically allowed them to invest in dark fiber that could be leased out through an open access network. I mean, would these seem like good potential?
I'll just start it, but I know definitely Craig will have something to say about that. Cities have a lot of responsibility and a lot of rights to expand broadband networks. There's no doubt about it. Cities also can, through interlocal agreement or through public agencies like CPS and SAHA and form agreements. That's legal to expand broadband to those citizens, right? So there are many ways that you can do it. And then you can invest in, like in the Valley, we have a demonstration project on the border. The city decided not to be a broadband provider. It was actually, could be possible from state law, but it wasn't the best economically for them. But they are going to invest in the middle mile network, intergovernmental network, and it's placed so strategically near the colonias, near communities that are on the wrong side of the digital divide and don't have access. And now SmartCom and Frontera Communications and others are coming and saying, we want to do the last mile. So just investing in that created that so that, and then it meets the family household balance sheet. So that's the test, right? Is how can a city play a strategic role to create a win-win situation where you make the last mile affordable, or you make agreements with companies to say, this is what the area median income is there, this is what they could sustain monthly in their family household balance sheet. And really be targeted in your approach. But cities can do a lot to unleash, to understand their own assets and to unleash the value of those assets and to expand the assets. And then the city can understand the three legs of the stool as well. And René Dominguez in economic development is fully aware of how he fits into the bigger picture of providing the infrastructure access with the training and technical assistance and working with the Digital Inclusion Alliance. Smart cities likewise is going to have to understand the assets so well that they can then work with, and we can create this a city project and a city approach that takes into account the three legs of the stool where you're going to be successful.
What she said. So I'll grab that because that's the point I wanted to make too. So 3 legs is connectivity. The second is affordability. And the third is skills, digital skills. Did I get that right? So inside of there, it becomes devices are part of that as well, right? But I think that really in the affordability, because you need to have the infrastructure to the neighborhood, then you need to be able to pay for it and have the device to connect to it, and then you need to have the skills to use it. So everything she said was great. What I'll be a little bit more blunt. My door is open to any telecom provider or whatever that wants to come in and talk. Just don't try to sell me junk, right? Because I think most of the conversations are not real conversations. They're about, hey, I want to help your community, but I really want to make money. And I understand that, right? I've been in private business myself. The answer is, how do you do both? And so at the end of the day, if you want to use city assets, to Jordana's point, we are open to that conversation for the good of our citizens, but at the end of the day, you have to go the whole way through the stool with us, right? You have to be willing to be part of the connectivity, part of the device, part of the affordability, and part of the skills. You have to go the whole way. You can't just get your last mile infrastructure for the city and then start making a bunch of money off the people who can afford it. So I think there are rules that I have to follow and constraints that we're under, but the door is always open. But let's always start that conversation from for the good of all, how are we going to solve this problem? Don't quote the junk part, please.
The only other person I'd like to acknowledge, Dale is here from the library system. And I'm sure while we're talking up here, Dale, you're thinking about all the interventions and the role that our library system plays in terms of access and affordability and connectivity. So I'm giving you a flavor of that, and really not really touching from an economic development standpoint our whole strategy around why high-speed internet is critical in terms of recruiting companies here and growing our economy. I kind of parked that a little bit to the side, but Dale and his team at the library are doing some incredible work around this issue also, and could probably speak on this topic for hours as well. So Dale, thanks for being here.
Hello, I want to thank you all for sharing your knowledge up here. I grew up on the inner west side of San Antonio around Our Lady of the Lake University, and I currently work on the south side of Palo Alto College. And as you mentioned, middle and low income, there's a huge digital divide. We have a lot of amazing partners, a lot of amazing nonprofits, organizations, corporations to work with, but often what we struggle with is how do we work together? How can we leverage all of the unique talents and skill sets that we can provide if we work together to address these pockets, this digital divide? So I appreciate what you mentioned, Jordana, about the City Council group on digital inclusion. How can we work together in these pockets of areas of the South Side so that we can work quicker to address the long-term needs of our community so we can collaborate? How can we, what can we do, the folks in the middle of things in the South Side, the inner West Side? What would you recommend we do to leverage these partnerships?
Can I start? She's going to give you a much better answer, but I'm going to be tactical. Where? I think the first question there is, right, is where? Pick a spot. We need to be really clear about the places to go first, and then weave it into this conversation as we go forward. In the Smart City program, we're ready in the spring to start a whole series of prototypes around solving civic problems with technology and data. I want you to quote this: we don't solve problems with technology and data, we solve problems with people. People solve problems. So when we have people who can advocate for other people in this neighborhood, at this place, this is where the problem needs to be solved, then we can use this structure to say, let's go in and solve for that group. You're going to hear about innovation zones throughout the city. Brook City Base is one of those innovation zones. It just so happens that the neighborhoods around Brook City Base are exactly the neighborhoods we're talking about right here. So Leo Gomez has been awesome saying, we can use Brook City Base as a place to experiment with technology and data as we do these smart city solutions. But I will not be an island of prosperity. You will solve for the digital divide around my community at the same time. So things like that get me fired up because they get me focused in an area to all the things that Jordana was talking about. We can go solve and change some lives. There's 1.9 million people in our area to solve for, all kinds of problems. Which ones in which areas, which personas? I think this group can do that, be advocates for people who need this.
And thank you for your question. A person from Alamo Colleges, Palo Alto College, I'm not saying his name right now, one of your deans that's in charge of technical education will be on a panel this afternoon. And community colleges are key. So we would like the community college, first I'm going to just say, to be part of the Digital Inclusion Alliance. You have Chancellor Mike Flores now, and we're all very excited because he totally gets it. He was one of the first people I presented when I was presenting on preparing workers for the expanding digital economy. Community colleges are so key to what's happening in our economy, the shrinking middle class and the closing off of opportunities to enter the middle class. So your involvement as a community college, we need to be part of this group, and then we can work together as we try to mobilize resources, right? Foundations, financial institutions, and others that are supporting programs like this. We can share that information and kind of be part of the conversation. But we thought, the Digital Inclusion Alliance thought today was a good way to just kind of start. And we have Alamo Colleges represented. We have you here, thank goodness. But community colleges are key to creating the new entryways into the middle class. In the publication, I talk about the new collar workers, right? That we're not saying that you don't need a 4-year degree, that's great. But what we need in our society is flexibility that we've had in the past, where you can have various ways to enter the middle class. It doesn't mean that that's the end of your life if you have an associate's degree or a certification and you end up at the Open Cloud Academy with Rackspace or at CodeUp, and then you go into a great job. You can still go and get a computer science degree, but you have a great middle skills job that has opportunities for advancement, and if that's what you choose to keep going, and you have benefits and everything else, right? So that's what we're trying to create, many opportunities. I know this very intimately. My community colleges have had the biggest impact on my family's trajectory, right? Going from a very poor South Texas community with low expectations for the children. My brother dropped out of high school. He worked some middle skills jobs like surveying and on the oil rigs, and then he got his GED, then went to community college, went to pharmacy school, then went to medical school, became a surgeon, a doctor. He's been paying millions of dollars in taxes, serving his community every day. He even served as a surgeon for Iraq and Afghanistan during the wars, and has served his country. So that's the kind of flexibility we need, not somebody to be defined by being a high school dropout or only going to community college. We need those entry points into the middle class to create new entry points. And that's why when I said we need to look at things anew, it's because the past is closing off. We're losing those other middle skills jobs, but there's an opportunity with new collar workers to prepare them well for all the opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordana. And with that, we're already past about 7 minutes, and we're going to need a little bit of a break. So I apologize, we're not going to have any closing remarks, but you have said so much, and it's amazing. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge and experience. And we're going to give you a 3-minute break. So thank you so much.
We need to go on the road, dudes.
Check, 1, 2, check, check, check. Check, 1, 2. It's not gonna work. Check, 1, 2. Check, check, check. Check. I'm doing my own microphone if that's okay. Is this neat? I'm going to do my own microphone if that's all right. Can you hear that okay? Doesn't sound like you can hear that very well. Is that okay? Check. I bring my own microphone to things. Is that wrong? Check. We're fine. Everything's fine. Don't worry. Check 1, 2. I think it's a little low. No, I think, can people hear me at that level? I don't know. Yeah, that's good. Thanks. Ooh, there it goes. It's a little hot. Check 1, 2. It'll be quieter then, but check 1, 2. And I have a, that's good. Great, thanks. They're giving me the go symbol, so if we can sit down, make our way to our seats. We'll start in about, I don't know, 2 minutes? 2 minutes? 2-minute warning? Thanks.
Does this mic work?
All right, we're going to get started. So we're going to ask that everybody make their way to their seats, please. I apologize for my microphone if it if it explodes with reverb. Thank you. I like it. So I apologize if my microphone gets a little ringy. I brought my own because that's what radio people do. They bring their own microphones. That was effective. Hi, I'm Paul Flav. I'm the technology and entrepreneurship reporter for Texas Public Radio, and this panel is called Discovering San Antonio. What can we do with data? Thank you so much to the Digital Inclusion Alliance for having me and for letting me host such wonderful panelists for this intriguing discussion. I'm not a data scientist, and as a reporter, I actually don't work with a large number, or regularly with large data sets, but I'm fascinated with data-driven decision-making. It's not new, but it's certainly in vogue right now. It's something that is, I think, it's good that it's in vogue, but there are also some drawbacks we're going to get into a little later. And right now, there's never been a greater time to analyze the world around us with data. And in fact, I was speaking with a professor at the Georgia Institute of Technology, Stephen French, and I asked him, where are we in terms of communities and data and their abilities to look at this and analyze their own universes, and he said, cities and communities are being hit by a data tsunami. They're awash in data with too few resources to navigate it, analyze it, or draw conclusions. So that is why we're having this conversation today. Hopefully you'll be illuminated as to how you can find resources, how you can find data that will help you in your own work to tell the stories of San Antonio and some of the things going on in it. So joining me on stage this morning, 3 experts in the arena, finding data, making it readable, telling stories with it, and making sure the community makes decisions based on it. Emily Royal, former data director at the Rivard Report, now a smart city coordinator for the city of San Antonio. Thank you. Yes, thank you. I'm insisting on clapping, by the way. And she's also started a company called Overt. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep.
So
It's the French word for open.
okay, excellent, excellent. Also, Laura McKieran, Executive Director of Community Information Now, a nonprofit staff to the UT Health School of Public Health in San Antonio, helps local people access, understand, and use data to improve community conditions. Thank you, Laura, for being here. And last but not least, because she's also in the center, Crystal Alexander, an economist with P16 Plus, Council of Greater Bexar County. P16 is a collective impact partnership that leverages data and coordinates leaders to drive youth outcomes across San Antonio. All of their titles, 2 of the 3 titles, had data in them. So that's good. That's a good sign for what we're talking about. So we have about 40 minutes to talk, and I was told we need to answer just a few questions here today. What are data sets? Where can you find them? How can you use data to tell stories? And how are people using it to help leaders take action? So actually there's 4. How do you guys build strong relationships and lead to partnerships? So I believe even with me as moderator, we can accomplish this mission in just 40 minutes. But before we even get to that, I want to ask just a really basic question, which is why do any of this? Why tell stories with data? What is the potential there for impacting the conversation around social ills? And today, since we're talking about digital inclusion, specifically digital inclusion. And who would like to start? I'm going to go with Emily because she's smarter than me. Well, they're all smarter than me. I shouldn't have said that way.
We're all smarter than you.
Yeah, sorry.
Just kidding. So why is it important? Well, in my own work, let's see if I can do that. In my own work at the Rivard Report formerly, it's important because, like Craig and Jordana were alluding to, you have to bring the community up with you towards these realizations of what the problems are, where they are, and include their voice. And I think that when we map out or talk about the digital divide, we need to make sure that we are making that data available, accessible, and that we're being transparent about how to find it and where it's located. So I think it's important primarily because people are the data points that we are describing, and when we tell stories, we're able to access more people's hearts and minds. So at the Rivard Report, part of my work was to find all these data sets, whether they're trapped in PDFs or Excel files or whatever, and really transform them into a map or into an interactive graphic, which sounds so kind of lame in a way, but seeing the effect that had on how the public understands issues was transformative for me. And it's so much more than keeping data locked in silos where organizations that have the power to analyze it make decisions based off of it. It's about storytelling and really transforming those data assets, as we say, into understandable images, graphics, and interactive pieces. Yeah.
Crystal.
I'll go next. What I think is really important about stories is how we use data to illuminate the things that we care about and how we use them to help frame the reality around us. I do think that sometimes as data analysts and people who work with data, we use the data to confirm some of the things that we already believe, or sometimes we use the data as a weapon to hurt others. And so I think that it is also important to use data and data analytics to tell stories of hope and success, to help reframe the conversation. I'll give you one example that I ran across in my work recently. I'm dealing with K through 12 education data, sometimes higher ed data, but primarily K through 12. And in those data sets, one thing that we look at is student discipline for Black males in Bexar County. And we often talk about the fact that Black males have higher percentage of them get involved in discipline incidents at school. And of Black males who do get involved in discipline incidents, there are twice as many discipline incidents per student as white males. So we look at those disparities and we see a problem. Often what we don't talk about, though, is that 75% of black males experience no discipline incident whatsoever. 3/4 of black males do not get in trouble at school. And I think that if we want to serve black males in our community, one thing that we have to realize is that we have to go beyond discipline incidents to do so. And I think data can help guide us towards different types of social interventions, innovative interventions that are different from what we're used to.
The answer I give to this question generally depends on how tired I am and what kind of mood I'm in that day. Today's not a good day. Apologies in advance. You can give a really earnest speech with a lot of good cases, as Emily and Crystal have, for what data can bring to the table, to the conversation, and moving you past stuck points, illuminating places where there's inequity, helping you figure out how to target resources in scarce budgets, get ahead of the curve and plan for the future. All those things are true. On days when I'm in a bad mood, I kind of turn it around and say, make me a case for using something else to make a decision. Backroom politics and special interests, funder whims, somebody's passionate cause and they're the loudest voice in the room. Like, if these things worked, I'm just thinking they would have by now, right? So there is a lot to think about in how we use data and how we make sure that we do good with it and not harm. But to me, it's the only sane way to approach decision-making, resource allocation, planning for present and future.
Before we move on, just as a personal note, data was really what I think has led to the Digital Inclusion Alliance. It's what has led to today. It's what led to last year. And I think it's what's led to kind of a culmination of a lot of reporting around, specifically in my world, a lot of reporting around digital inclusion. I think if Jordana hadn't come to the summit last year and said, here's a ranking, and here are the percentages, 1 in 4 San Antonio homes does not have internet access, I think a lot of this conversation may not have taken place, at least in the media environment, because that's such a massive data point that is unavoidable, that is impossible to ignore for any reporters that were in the room that day. So I know I was there. I know that was a big reason why I decided to, start those conversations with Jordana and find out about projects going on the border, going on in San Antonio, and write about it myself. So data, obviously, just not to disparage her comments, but data can be good, Laura. And so we'll talk more about that. But first, what are data sets? Where do you find these data? We'll go back this direction. Laura, what are the data you're looking at? Is it public? And how can it be used?
Community information now looks across all issue areas, all geographic levels, Bexar and surrounding counties, and to some degree Texas. So we look at a lot of the things that are upstream of whether you have access and a lot of the things that are downstream. And by access, again, I'm talking about whether you have a connection, whether you have a device, and whether you have the skills and knowledge and comfort to use it, to get on board. So certainly we rely a lot on American Community Survey data for those kinds of things, and that does include information about what's in the household. Those are questions asked of people. So do you have a device? Do you have a connection? That kind of thing. The FCC is another source. NTIA, I think probably the easiest portal to send them to is if you just search for BCAT, B-C-A-T. That's where you'll find probably the best distilled collection of stuff. So that's the big picture.
Since I work primarily with education data, I'll point you to a couple of education data sets that you might find useful. One is the Texas Education Agency has a wealth of knowledge about K through 12 data down at the campus level, so you can look at your particular community and what's going on with campuses in your community. The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board is also a really great source of information on Texas schools, where students are coming from, what's happening to them while they're at school, and who's graduating with what types of degrees. Nationally, there's a data set called the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, or IPEDS, as we affectionately refer to it. And that is a national data set on colleges and universities, technical schools, and the programs that they provide. I also think that the BLS can be a great source of information. That stands for Bureau of Labor Statistics, for things like average weekly wage and some income statistics that you might be interested in.
I'm gonna grab this clicker real quick, see if it works. Oh yeah. Okay. So when I joined the Digital Inclusion Alliance a little over a year ago, the first thing that struck me as a data professional was, how much discussion there was about the digital divide in San Antonio. And my first thought was, well, where is it? And I have people saying, well, it's here, it's there, it's everywhere, it's the digital divide, right? And working with data, that was a challenge for me because I was kind of like, well, I want to be able to point out where in our community is this problem actually happening. So I did a little bit of work looking at a data set that is mapped here. And this is showing you residential fixed internet access subscriptions. And what that basically means is, where is broadband being provided and who is signing up for it in our community? So this is the number of connections per every 1,000 households. So that gives you a little bit of a percentage. Darker red is least connected, the fewer number of connections per 1,000 households. Bluer areas have more connections per 1,000 households. And this data set comes from the FCC, which requires, through Form 77, this is like super technical, but it requires that internet service providers report to the federal government where they offer subscription access. And then it's important to make the distinguishing factor between where internet's being provided and where people are signing up for it. So this map is showing you where people sign up, where people actually pay for internet, actually have it in their homes. So we're seeing, a digital divide. And actually a lot of people's intuition was correct. It is kind of here and there and everywhere. And it also shows how much this issue maps onto income, which we know intuitively in San Antonio, lower incomes on the east, south, and west sides, but also how much of an inner urban issue this is as well. So I think, I hope to answer your question and how that ties a little bit into storytelling as also is, once we created this map and we're able to go to communities and present it and show it, then the issue became so much more tangible. And people had a reference and they could say, well, I can use this map, I can share this map, I can replicate it, and I can access the data, which is publicly accessible, so in theory any of you could go create the same map. And that's really important, and that empowers people to kind of get a handle on these challenges that sometimes feel so ephemeral to us. And so that's really, I think, an important role that data can play, especially in San Antonio at this time.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
I really appreciate you bringing up this data set because it's one of the publicly available data sets that we can use as a community to help illuminate some of the problems that we're having or some of the successes that we want to illuminate. And there are a lot of publicly available data sets out there. There are a lot of organizations that are on the mission of making more data publicly available that we can use. What comes to mind, too, is Raj Chetty and his work with the Opportunity Atlas. They have made tons of data publicly available and easily usable. So if you have not Googled Opportunity Atlas and looked at their data sets, please put that on your to-do list for after the conference.
I'm interested, just before we kind of wrap up on this question, you guys have listed a number of pretty accessible and pretty usable databases, but for a lot of people, I think they are very intimidating. I mean, even the American Community Survey, it seems like it should be very easy to use, but when you're trying to really answer a very specific question, it becomes all of a sudden an impossible device. Is there anything that you can recommend for things like that, or for Bureau of Labor Statistics? I just call them and I say, please walk me through this because you're smarter than me. But for the American Community Survey and things like that, or these education ones that I have not had to work through, what are the opportunities for people to learn how to get those answers?
I'll go first on that one. That is all that community information now does. We're a nonprofit local data intermediary. We don't do any direct interventions on anything except to help people access, understand, and use data to improve neighborhood and community conditions. So that means that we work to open up access to data, and in some cases that might mean helping people navigate something like American Fact Finder to get American Community Survey data. In others, it's trying to get access to what we call administrative data, which is data generated in the course of everyday business. So think attendance records for kids in school, or the billing data from when you've been to the hospital and the doctor bills you or your insurance company. Those data sets are generally locked away and hidden, and they're incredibly powerful, but trying to pull those together and process them in a way that they can actually bring information to the table instead of just raw data. And then training technical assistance. We sit with people a lot as they're walking through decision making and help them understand what the data can be understood to be saying or not. So one easy answer is get in touch with us. If you just search community information now in San Antonio, you'll find us. That might be easier actually than giving you our URL. And we'll see what we can do to get you oriented, to get you going.
What I heard Laura say was contact a specialist or get training. I think that these are important things because there are a lot of technical bits to dealing with data sets. There are also software programs that are available that you can learn how to use that will help you to visualize your data. So if you want to become more powerful in doing your own analytics, learning how to use some software programs may be a good investment of your time, because you can not only visualize the data, but make it available to other people, which is also what P16 Plus does. We are also, as a collective impact backbone, one of our primary services is taking publicly available data sets and making them accessible to partners and to people who are interested in it, putting it out on our website, and helping people to make decisions with that data. We also help to make data available that is sensitive, like administrative data where your personally identifiable information may be attached to that data set. We are trained in HIPAA, we're certified, and FERPA is very similar to HIPAA in how to protect personally identifiable information. So we're able to take that data, connect it to other data sources, and aggregate it, and then provide aggregated information back to the community for use. And so getting a specialist, contacting an expert, and learning how to use some of the new digital software tools are all good ways of answering specific questions with publicly available data. And practice.
So I don't think I could have answered that question much better than either of you. So I'll just take a minute to make a socioeconomic point. One of the great ironies I feel like I've seen recently is that data analysis skills are being democratized in the sense that you can go online and for free download a software like Tableau. And easily manipulate data. You can get on YouTube, you can learn coursework from Coursera. There's so many free resources, which is really empowering a lot of people to analyze data. The flip side of that is that data itself, I don't think, is so democratically accessible, right? So people are learning how to analyze it, but the availability of data, I think, is still a challenge. So, that was my full-time job at the Rivard Report. It really took somebody paying me an annual salary to spend my time finding data, building relationships in our community with people, creating agreements, data sharing agreements, so that we could obtain data sets that we could then use in our stories. So I think that's an interesting irony that I've observed, and I just wanted to make that point.
No, I think it's a good one. I think, there are, speaking as a reporter, just obstacles to public information in general put up for very specific reasons. I mean, I just, as a personal point, Yesterday I got a public information request that I put in February. I was very excited, but that story ran a long time ago. So, so data sets in particular, something that not only are behind a wall, but also maybe a little opaque to someone like me, it's adding barriers to really being able to decipher it. So, but it sounds like, there are experts in the community that can help you with that. There's software. But I'm interested in this idea of good data versus bad data, or maybe more specifically, maybe data that's incomplete. I use this, we talked a couple days ago, and I used this example. Last summer, TxDOT bought a bunch of data from the app Strava, which is a fitness app. It's for cyclists, it's for runners, and it was like the first time that some of these transportation folks had ever seen something so comprehensive. It's all these data points. They had never been able to really see exactly where cyclists were going. It was very exciting for people who got to plan this stuff, but they also know, and people like me may not have known if they had not brought it up, that is only part of the picture, because people that use Strava are overwhelmingly whiter, and they're overwhelmingly of a higher education level and of a higher income level. So how do you guys know, when you're looking at data, that it is the complete picture, and how do you determine what it's actually telling you? How do you know data is data?
I think that's at the core of any data scientist's job, right? Is to be able to verify the integrity of the data, but also create the right kinds of structures and mechanisms to collect it in the first place in a way that is equitable. I think that's an interesting point that you're making about Strava. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's basically an app where when you go jogging or running, it literally tracks on a GPS where you're going and how fast you are. It's a fitness app. Turns out that data that they're collecting is super important for planning for safe pedestrians, access for sidewalks and complete streets. That has a real value, I think, to city governments or urban planners. So they are interested in buying that data from a company like Strava. And the challenge there, of course, is to verify that, well, not everybody uses Strava in our community. Not everybody has a smartphone in our community. So, let's get real about what these data sets represent. And a lot of times, I think organizations are aware of that, and so they use it as supplemental to their decision making. But that question is, I think, something that's on every data scientist's mind today is, how do we create inclusive data? How do we create structures that can collect inclusive data? I really don't have the answer, and I don't, maybe you guys do. That's a really difficult question, ethical data. And I think that's something that is a hot research topic right now. People are trying to wrap their minds around and create innovation around.
I would say that the only data that I've ever seen that was perfect was the ones from the textbooks at school. Those were the only perfect data sets that were beautiful, clean, mistake-free. They were amazing. So we learn on those data sets, right? But then as soon as you step out of that environment, all the data sets are messy. They all have missing data. They all have implicit biases. They have biases that go back generations. I mean, even in the Strava data set, even if everyone were using Strava and everyone did have a smartphone, would we be able to capture the fact that in some poor communities, there are no sidewalks? That's why they're not riding bikes, because it's not safe, because they don't have money for bikes. So maybe they would have taken a route that city planners need to know about had they had those bikes. So I think that, I forgot the question, completely forgot the question.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, okay, I'm back. Right, all data has problems, and I think that the best use for the data that we're analyzing is to shine a light on where to look for more information. Once you see the data develop a potential problem in your community, that's when it's time to investigate. That's when it's time to dig deeper and try to find out what's behind this. Do you have the complete story? You probably don't. So what's the rest of it, and what are you missing? So I think that's the best use for how to understand missing or incomplete data sets.
Yeah, in our world, there's a shiny magical unicorn called metadata that doesn't exist most of the time, but theoretically that's the user guide for any data set. It says, where did this data come from? How was it collected? What are all these different fields mean? What are some of the quirks in how it's been collected or coded? I mean, like in healthcare, if an insurer pays for one diagnosis but not another, anybody with this diagnosis is going to get this one, so the healthcare provider is going to get paid. It's important to know all those kinds of things about a data set. In terms of like hashtag pro tips, I would say there's two big things to be thinking about when you're evaluating data, and it doesn't have to be that big of a deal. It's sort of like evaluating news articles online, right? And sort of you're doing that all the time if you're being responsible, figuring out is this a trustworthy source, trustworthy reporting, that kind of thing. Administrative data, who does that get? What kinds of people are in administrative data sets? It's people who are already engaged in the system somehow. People who are getting services, people who have been arrested, people who are enrolled in schools. So think about all the kinds of people we miss out of those data sets. If you're trying to go and find out about what the characteristics are of people with severe mental illness, and you go and look in a severe mental health provider data set, you're going to find the people who are being treated, and you won't find out about all the people who have that issue, especially given what a shortage of services there is in that area. The other one is certainty, or representativeness and certainty. Certainties, when you can't ask everybody, the way we do in the census, for example, and you have to do a sample or a survey, the smaller your sample, the more uncertainty there is about your estimate that comes from that. How many people here are familiar with the notion of margin of error or confidence intervals? Katie gets tortured by me all the time about that, so she knows. Proof of concept. You hear about polls, voting polls coming out and saying, you know, they're 45% plus or minus 3% support this candidate. Well, you have that margin of error on any survey. We tend not to report them. We pretend they don't exist at all. But sometimes, truly, the estimate from American Community Survey is going to be 37% plus or minus 38%. I'm not kidding. They do go negative. So knowing that, you know how you're going to treat that estimate as compared to 37% plus or minus 1%. It's very different, especially when you're using that data to trend performance over time. So those are two of the big things that I'd say to watch out for. I guess the point I missed here, the analog to people not being in the data set for administrative data on the survey data side is people who don't answer surveys. So if it's household, people going door to door, that's the kind of people who don't want to answer the door and talk to a stranger. Now that more and more things are being administered online, you can imagine that it's a completely different set, not completely, a largely different set of things that influence whether they are or not going to participate in that survey.
I think that's a good time to bring up the next census. Census 2020 is going to pivot to a digital format. They're doing it, they say to save billions of dollars, and actually did have a graph that showed about, I showed a cost reduction of $5 billion or so from Pew, I believe. But I'm just wondering, you guys are talking about how those folks are potentially going to be left out and the implications for that. I know, Crystal, you were touching on how data can reinforce some of the status quo and some of the lack of resources going to different communities, like those safe streets. Those kids didn't need those safe streets because there's obviously the Strava didn't show that they were riding there. So they don't need, obviously that's not, our planners are not using it for that. But I'm just wondering, talk about Census 2020 and what the implications are for the future. Anybody? Or I can talk about it.
I can. I was going to defer because I just talked for a month straight. So yes, the first pass is online, and they're hoping to get most folks online, and then there will be follow-ups through other methods like telephone, and then finally on the ground enumerators. different things that we need to be thinking about. You know, literally the lack of access to an internet connection or a device that will allow you to respond. And when I first heard it was going online, I was like, well, no big deal, it's 10 questions. Like, people can do that through their phone, right? What I'm hearing is that the folks who were really interested in plowing a lot of resources into user-centered design and having it be a mobile-friendly application did not win that budget fight. So it's not actually something you can easily take on your phone, which is absurd. I mean, it's 10 questions. But we are looking, I think, at needing to go to a desktop device to respond. So that's a huge deal. Lack of skills, if you think about the older population especially that hasn't been doing computers all their lives, and they won't have the same comfort level doing an online survey that younger folks might. And of course the distrust, which is an issue whether you're talking about an online administration or in person. So we're really going to have to do a very good job in the next year and a bit of grassroots outreach and connecting to people, educating them that this is coming, making sure that they do have access through a library, through a community center, a nonprofit that they work with, something like that, their kids' school. We're going to have to figure out all those things for education and access.
When I think about the Census 2020, I also often think about how we use census data and what we are and are not able to measure even with census data. So I think about the informal economy and the amount of activity that goes on that is not captured. And when you ask people, how much money are you making, for example, they may be inclined to be less honest on a census than what is really happening in their day-to-day lives. So I often look at the census numbers and then I think, okay, I know where this comes from. What could I be missing when I'm looking at these numbers and trying to make decisions about where to invest in the community or how to invest in the community?
I just want to add, as a professional working with the census data, how widespread its use is, which I don't think I quite realized as previously somebody who just filled out the census and then later somebody who actually relied on it for my day-to-day work. How often it's used. I mean, I'd say like 80% of the time when you look at a report, when you're looking at an article, it's census data. American Community Survey is census data. It's unbelievable how many decisions in our country are being made on a day-to-day basis based on that one data set. So I think in a way it's critical for people to participate, and for governments it's critical to lower those barriers to participation and really do the legwork on understanding what those barriers are, because they're different for different communities in different parts of town. That is so important because that data is just, it's so critical.
Yeah, it's not just data, people. I mean, for folks who may not know, the decennial census determines our proportional representation.
That too.
In our representative democracy. So truly, actually the head count that is the decennial census, not the wealth of detail that we rely on so much from American Community Survey, drives the representation and often resource allocation. And the American Community Survey then is based on census, a lot of it. So any error that's introduced every 10 years is going to carry forward through the whole decade. So lots and lots of different implications to not getting a complete count.
And I just want to add, if there's any people who work with data out there, that the census office is actually really accessible. Like, you can get somebody on the phone within a few minutes. I don't think people call the census that often. So there's like 5 people over there in like Michigan or something, and like, you know, you can get to a first name basis with them pretty quickly. So for this massive organization, they're very accessible. I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes, so we'll get into the last portion, which is just how do we create.
Oh, it's a question.
Oh, we have a question. Hello.
Yes.
I find it very interesting in talking about this data that this map looks similar to I can take this one first, and then you guys can jump in. But if you overlay maps of many of the things that we care about, like income, like education or graduation rates, if you start overlaying maps, you see a very similar picture to the digital divide map. It keeps coming up. The same people who are doing well economically or doing well in school also have internet access. So I'm not saying that there's a connection here, but I think you said there's, and I agree. What I'm suggesting though is that we need to go down to the root causes, that there are underlying issues here that the data is not picking up on, and that the root cause analysis is, that deeper level analysis is super important, especially for our community.
Before we go, I want to make sure to have Laura talk about the Alamo Regional Data Alliance and talk about that and what it can be used for and how it is kind of firming up.
So I can talk about this. I can also say that we have an incoming Data Alliance Steering Committee member in Crystal and an outgoing in Emily. We hope to get her back. We have representation tied to organizations or employers. So when she left Rivard Report, she came out of her category, her seat. The Alamo Regional Data Alliance is a network of all kinds of folks who share a vision to improve the lives of people in our region by establishing and maintaining a culture of data-driven action, or data-informed, if you're in that camp. The intent is to bring people together across silos, and I don't just mean analysts, but all kinds of people, data users, data generators, data analysts, to try to increase access to data locally, to try to improve our capacity to understand and use data to make decisions, to try to build a culture in every different organization and resources in every different organization to use data appropriately to inform decisions. So that website's alamodata.org if anybody wants more information or wants to join, get on a mailing list.
Before we wrap up, I want to make sure we have time for questions. I will try and repeat them so my Nowcast friends don't pull their hair out.
Can I
So
add something, Paul?
who has any questions?
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah, please.
So as Laura mentioned, I am an outgoing ARDA committee member, and I've transitioned to the city of San Antonio. Yesterday was my first day, and my mind is like blown. But I wanted to point out my colleague, Thomas, in the back, and he is taking a survey for the city of San Antonio about our innovation zones. This is Brooks, the medical center, and downtown, and there will be some projects to prototype different types of smart city technologies in those areas, and we want to get your thoughts and feedback and ideas. So that survey is about that. You can visit him and contribute your thoughts.
All right, so Jordana, go ahead. You had your whole other panel, but you have questions, so.
Regarding the FCC big data, for example, at our first Digital Inclusion Alliance, I did a map, and what was available was only at 3 MVPs. So it's also important, as Emily knows, that you need to know what you're looking at as well. Because the only thing the FCC made available was at 3 MVPs, and if you see my analysis of technology, that's very close to dial-up speed, but and the FCC's definition of broadband is 25 MVPs down and 3 up. High-speed internet access that's always on at 25 MVPs down and 3 up. Why is there only data available at the time of the 2017 summit of 3 MVPs, and now this one is at 10 MVPs, if that's their threshold, right? So we have to always say what it's showing, and it helps us to make an agency like the FCC, we can be knowledgeable and say, hey, why aren't you showing the reality of what people have access to? We're limited in the story that we can tell. When I put up the map, the first map of San Antonio at 3 MVPs,
Jordana, I want to just jump in really quick because you are completely 100% correct, especially on North Side. North Side School District is where there's a lot of internet access, but there are 61 different languages spoken by students in the ELL program in North Side. So when you talk about people with various languages not having internet access or access to broadband services, but then we look at a map of the area where they live and we say, okay, those people do have access, they're okay. Not all people in that blue area also have the same type of broadband access.
You just have to be able to tell the deeper story.
Right.
It's powerful to get it on the agenda for sure, but it's not a diagnostic tool. And even the map of the U.S. that I did in Closing the Digital Divide with census data, it completely mirrored the map of persistent poverty in the country.
And just to reinforce your point, this map is showing 10 megabits per second, which is the speed of broadband internet access. What's considered normal is 25. Normal internet use is checking email, surfing, maybe playing some video games. Okay, so this is already below the threshold of what normal use is, which suggests that maybe the picture is a little bit darker than we would.
So know what you're looking at and
want, yeah.
do your homework on what you're actually having.
Sorry,
available.
data people talk a lot.
That's all right.
I know we're late.
It's good. No, I think we're done now. So I apologize for anyone else who had questions. But we really appreciate the opportunity to talk today. So thank you. Let's thank our panel, please.
I'm going to go ahead and call y'all's attention back up here. I'm going to have to be a little tight on the schedule because we have a couple of people that can only be here for their panel and their keynote later. So we only have 2 mics, but we probably needed 3. Can you all, if you have questions, as the panelists are going through, use a folder or maybe the hard stock palm card that's on your table to let us know when he gets towards the end of the panel that you might have a question, and we'll come borrow a microphone. That way Nowcast, who's streaming and recording the sessions, they can hear you all.
Check, check. Yeah, that works nice. Do that to JJ. You got a fancy one, dude. Goes over your ear. Oh.
Snap. Okay, great. It's on now. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our next panel. We're going to be talking about schools, libraries, and community access. My name is JJ Velasquez. I cover technology for the Rivard Report. As you heard earlier during Emily's panel, it's a nonprofit journalism organization. And while I was steep in this topic this week, the concept of the great equalizer kept coming up. And if education is a great equalizer, internet access has become one of the most important tools for unlocking that potential. But the democratization of knowledge has not always been democratic. I don't think it's been, the way that, the creators of the web foresaw it. And so as job applications, textbooks, and other forms of schooling have moved online now, there's a segment of the population that's left in the lurch by the more comprehensive adoption of the internet that's taken place, especially in recent years. And just last week, a Pew Research Center study found that 1 in 5 teens sometimes cannot complete all their homework because they lack internet access at home. And as you've heard today, in San Antonio, that problem is more acute. A fourth of households here are not online. So before I introduce our panel, quick show of hands. How many people have had to go to a friend's house, a family member's, or maybe a Wi-Fi enabled place of business to use the internet because there was no connection at home? Yeah. How many have done so in the last year? Yeah. So this is often the reality, the daily reality for the unconnected households of San Antonio. And that feeling of being incessantly out of pocket for a service that is so tied to one's economic well-being, I think perfectly encapsulates the challenge that we're facing in bridging this digital divide. Do schools, libraries, and community gathering places have a role to play in delivering that access? Our panelists are here to answer that question. With me, I have Candelaria Mendoza. She's a former library services administrator with the San Antonio Public Library, and now newly appointed Smart City Coordinator for the city of San Antonio. Congratulations on your new role. Moonri Jester is the San Antonio Housing Authority's Connect Home Program Manager. And yes. And Scott Lolleman is the Director of Technology for South San ISD. Thanks for joining us today. So I want to start off with the topic of the homework gap, this idea that students are not able to complete their homework because of they lack internet access, which has become pretty much the hub of where students complete their assignments. So Scott, I want to start with you. South San estimates about a fifth of students in the district lack internet access at home. Tell us about the impact that it has within the district.
So I think one of the things that it really impacts with us, and I was just thinking about your question about having to go to a friend's house or a place with Wi-Fi access, and I didn't raise my hand because I thought, well, only if my network goes out at home. But then I thought, no, even if my network goes out at home, I have a hotspot enabled smartphone, and I also have a hotspot, a cellular hotspot that's on a completely different cellular network that I use from work. So I actually have 3 different ways to access the internet at my house, and our kids don't have that. South San is in that big red spot that you saw in the last presentation. And so, a lot of our kids don't have that access at home, and so that means that they've got to do that work at school. That means that our teachers have to adapt and make sure that the kids are getting their work done at school, and it's come to a point where we see teachers not really even assigning homework that much because they know it's not going to get done at home. And that's been the case for a long time, even before internet access in high poverty areas, because those kids are having to go home and take care of brothers and sisters, and cook and do those kind of things that their parents are not able to do because they're out working 2 or 3 jobs. But one of the things that you said was we estimated that about a fifth of our students, about 20%, did not have internet access at home. We actually found out something different. Can we move that to the one? We surveyed our students last year, and we actually found out that almost 90%, go to the next one. Nope, go. Maybe not. Yeah, maybe we didn't. Sorry. Okay, so that's what I get for editing my slides first thing in the morning, right? Well, we found about 89% of our kids have some kind of internet access at home. But what we don't know is what that internet access looks like. Is it just access on a smartphone? Do they truly have wired home internet connection or wireless available to them? And even if they do, a lot of times they still don't have access to a desktop device or something of that nature. And so what we've done in South San is we've got a one-to-one program at our high school where all of the students, freshmen through seniors now, have a device that they're able to take home. Our juniors and seniors have iPads, our freshmen and sophomores have Chromebooks, and then we've trickled that down sort of to the middle school level, where at our 3 middle schools, they have a Chromebook cart in every single core classroom. So they have all math, science, ELA, and social studies classrooms have a cart of 30 Chromebooks for their students to use. And we also just this year started new middle school academy programs, and all of the students in those middle school academies have Chromebooks that they are able to take home with them. Then another way that we're addressing that homework gap is we were awarded the Sprint 1 Million program grant, where Sprint has provided hotspots to our students, to our high school students, to take home and use to have internet access at home. And they had to qualify for that. We had them fill out a survey asking them what kind of internet access they had at home, what access to devices they had at home. Last year we handed out 350 of those devices. This year, because there was such a demand for that program, we were only granted another 100 devices. So we were able to recover some of those from graduating seniors, but we have a waiting list at the high school of those devices. We've got students that are clamoring to get them. They're used quite a bit. I know our early college students, I was just talking with our high school instructional coach this morning, and she said our early college students really wish they had more data on those devices because they go through it so much. But that's one of the ways that we're trying to address that homework gap.
To your point about the level of digital access in homes, I have a really good friend who's a teacher at a Title I school. And you would think that, with the students' proficiency with smartphones, that they'd, have no problem using the desktop computers in their classroom, in their labs. But, it's a totally foreign concept to a lot of them. So I think that's, an interesting point to make and not one that, many people realize. Candelaria, how have public libraries helped accommodate students who need internet to do their homework?
So yeah, I think I'm going to share a few points because I think we do at the library kind of look at digital inclusion. It kind of fell very nicely with an alignment with the three legs of the stool, so connectivity and infrastructure, training and devices. Although we can't provide the connection at students' homes, we definitely can be a buffer zone. The San Antonio Public Library has 30 locations throughout the city of San Antonio. As Craig mentioned earlier, we do have free Wi-Fi access, but we also have public computers at every single location. We, of course, also include printing, and in a little bit I'll talk about some services that are coming up. But yeah, we definitely want to be a place for students to be able to go after school, on the weekends, and be able to get that access. We provide opportunities for training. We have several programs, and this kind of goes from 0 to, I guess, 100 or plus. We have on-demand technology assistance, so people can come in, our students, our community members, get one-on-one assistance with whatever it might be, their device that they just received. We know we have a lot of people, especially senior citizens, that come into our libraries that their nephew or niece or daughter or uncle have just given them a new device and they have no idea how to use this tablet, and they're looking for assistance, and the library is there to help get them to navigate and use these devices. We have Learn at Sapple. We actually have our table over there. If you want to learn some more about that, that is a partnership with DHS, which we do a very intense training for adults, and they could be pretty much in the whole scheme of things, from wanting to just learn some digital literacy skills, to getting their GED, to working on getting a master's or beyond. So it covers a huge range, and they're very great about being community-centric, and we have that at 4 library locations, and we're hoping to continue to expand just again because of the demand. And so as we get additional resources or opportunities, we want to continue to do more of that. We've done some special projects, Digital Inclusion Month, Digital Literacy Passport, that I'm sure Mooney will touch on as well. But again, providing that opportunity for classes at the libraries, trying to have it be a little bit convenient since we do cover a lot of ground within that map that was shown earlier. And then again, using the research that both, that a lot of the members, especially Jordana, has led to find to get grants. So Capital One, Wells Fargo, we submitted some proposals for them, and they've granted us resources to be able to support things like the Digital Literacy Passport so that we can get devices into the hands of community members. Devices, there's some interesting things that we've been doing. Obviously, we do have public computers throughout the libraries. These, the ones that are pictured here, are laptop dispensers. So if you have a library card, you can come check out a laptop, use it within the library using the free Wi-Fi. Again, we're hoping to add some additional services to where we can, in the future, add wireless printing, so you can do everything from your laptop. So in locations where maybe we don't have enough infrastructure for more computers, or where Wi-Fi is just a little bit easier to handle, we have these dispensers, and again, it's something that we're looking at expanding to other locations. And it's a new service that we've been providing at the libraries. Again, printing, faxing, and scanning, it's something that we're working on adding. So there will be an opportunity for community members to continue to add to the amount of services available to them from the library. And Connect Spaces, the bottom left picture there is some teens at the Encino Branch Library. We've added these touchscreen Mondo pads, so technology that maybe they can't get access to at home because of the expense and the uniqueness of what it is. They can go to the library, experiment, get to learn how to use them. They're touchscreens that have Microsoft, Excel, PowerPoint, everything on them, so people can either use them to explore and to do homework, or if they are looking to do an interview, all of that piece, they can use that for additional learning opportunities. Active Roadmap is something that we worked on last year, and I think I'll let Mooney touch base on homework gap pieces before I get into this piece. I'll save it for later.
Sure. I guess it's hard to talk about homework gap without this, introducing the scope of Connect Home. But so Connect Home, it's a HUD program that was launched 3 years ago, and initially the focus, our former mayor and Secretary Julian Castro, he was really the forefront in making sure that Connect Home happened. And then the main goal of Connect Home initially was to bridge the homework gap. It was all about kids and making sure that kids have the resources to connect and do homework. So in our communities, kids, if you go to any of the Saha properties, you see kids running and playing everywhere. So it's definitely a major focus, and then when Connect Home was launched, it was essentially more about connectivity and making sure the kids had connectivity at home to do the homework. But then as we're going to talk more about it, is that we need all three. So Connect Home right now, we expanded beyond just focus on kids and homework, and really empowering the parents and our seniors on the senior sites. But it's interesting to see that you talked about the Sprint and the hotspot and the bandwidth. It's just like when we talk about connectivity, it's not just about, oh, if they got a hotspot, they're good. If they watch one tutorial on how to do algebra, it eats all of their data. So when we talk about connectivity, I guess I especially in terms of the homework gap, is like keep in mind that it was like 5 up and 3 and 1 down, something like that, in terms of the fluctuation of the speeds of the connectivity. That's also a big issue when we talk about homework gap, because kids need to access the full, power and the full source of broadband to really use the internet effectively to do their homework. And then I can talk more about the program and what we're doing to bridge the homework gap and then all the stuff in a minute.
Sure. By the way, Candelaria has the unenviable task of wearing 2 hats today, so she'll be talking about the public library as well as the city of San Antonio. Gonna move forward to workforce development. Mooney, Saha's Jobs Plus program helps public housing residents find work. How has job hunting changed in the internet age, and what resources does this program provide?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to jump to this because I think that will help. Wait. Am I going backwards? Yes. So, as I mentioned, well, is that what you're looking for? No. Well, let's keep rolling. There we go. Okay, so this is Connect Home, and with the San Antonio Housing Authority, we were, designated as a Connect Home site, so one of 28 sites around the country. So we're one of the first pilot communities to become Connect Home. And I have to give a shout out to, we have a friends here from the Housing Authority of Choctaw Nation from Oklahoma. They're over there. They're just coming and learning more. So, what are we doing in San Antonio and what, we can help in sharing our, help them in their community and their reality. Can you hear me? So for Connect Home, again, as Candelaria was mentioned with the library, we provide all three of aspects of the digital inclusion: connectivity, devices, and training. The difference is that we really want to impact people on their homes and provide the connectivity at the house. Well, the format's all messed up, but this is a quick look of what we do. So Connect Home, we had to divide the program into tracks. And I really want to focus on the middle portion, is that when we talk about connectivity and training, we made sure that to think about what are the different implications of training. So we talked about, we have different partners to help with education and bridging the homework gap and applying for college. Cafe College is a huge partner of us. And STEM, we have CoGEM, Girls Inc., Systemic, they're all helping us provide that training on site. But for workforce development, we have the program called Jobs Plus. In Saha, has all the program Family Self-Sufficiency, and there are many other programs. And when Connect Home came in, we started asking, what role does digital inclusion play in workforce development? So one of the strategies that we have deployed is really looking at providing creating this track that's called entrepreneurship and workforce development. And essentially what that is providing more training and resources for people that are engaged in those programs. So in Jobs Plus, our program participants, Jobs Plus program, we refer them to Connect Home. And we provide them with 16 hours of computer literacy, which includes email basic, a spreadsheet, online safety, your digital footprint, but also things like online job search, how you do online job search effectively, how you create a resume, creating your profile, and what if your employer is going to Google you or find out who you are, what's going to come up. So so we embedded those kind of trainings as part of Connect Home, and I'm just going to jump here, and then once they once they finish the 16 hours of training, Connect Home, we give them a free device. So Goodwill is our amazing partner, and they are a refurbisher. So they collect our, used computers, and I'm going to urge everybody here, if you have any used computers or your organizations, go through your computers. It may not be in an organization, you may need better computers and update every 3 years. I think the life cycle of computers at 3 to 5 years. Those computers may not be good for you as an organization, but they're still perfectly fine to help bridge the digital divide. So that's one simple thing that anybody and everybody in this room can do, is really donate your devices to organizations to refurbish them so they can help programs like Connect Home and many others to bridge the digital divide. So since Connect Home launched, we have been working in different fronts, and we have different strategies and different partners for all three areas. But for the training, we have, I updated the number actually last night, it was 1,874 people that receive computer literacy training, and that is a major fact to the support that we have with the library through the Passport program and Bibliotech. So if you guys want to visit, I have my team there on the Connect Home table. We have a schedule of the classes that we offer every month as part of the Digital Literacy Passport program. And I invited anybody that if your organization have trainees and computer literacy trainees that would be helpful to our residents and people in the community, come and talk to me, because we really want to expand the resources that we can refer our residents to receive training. And then so the Passport program was with the library, but then with Goodwill we have provided 863 computer devices. And then for connectivity, we also have several different strategies that include the Sprint hotspot, but also the the Wi-Fi mesh network that our IT department does a great job in expanding, and there's so many other different strategies. So I'm gonna stop here so we can carry on.
Sure. I remember as a teen, I begged my parents for some allowance money, and they were like, nope. Open the classifieds, find a job. That's probably the last time I looked at the classifieds, to be honest with you. It's probably like 15 years ago. Candelaria, can you speak to how the library is sort of empowering residents to find work?
Sure. I mean, I think I would need a panel all by myself to kind of list the amount of things that the library is doing. But yeah, just a few things. Like I mentioned with Learn, that one-on-one assistance is really, really important, because I think everybody comes into the library at a different stage and everybody wants assistance then and there. So although classes are a great way for us to talk about a similar topic, whether somebody's learning to use a computer for the first time, or if it's Excel or Word that they're trying to just add and improve their skills on, the one-on-one assistant piece is very, very important, because they come at a stage of their digital literacy life cycle, and they have made it their way to come to the library, and they want you to help them then and there. If you tell somebody, oh, if you come back in 2 days for this class at 6 o'clock, it's not really going to work for their schedule. So a lot of what we do at the library is try to accommodate and help and assist those kinds of pieces, especially when it comes to workforce. If somebody's looking to improve that resume, create an email for the first time so that they can actually set that up. I mean, the full gamut of it all, of whether it's from the beginning stages or for a little bit more advanced of just updating something and being able to email it, or just having that internet access to be able to do some job searching. At Central, we do have a jobs and small business center that people can go to and get a little bit more assistance from staff in developing those skill sets and having somebody review their resumes. We also have a resource online, so once they're at the library, or if they do have access, we have a tutoring service that includes pretty much everything, and there's live professionals on the other side, so people could submit their resumes and have somebody look at them. They can look at, practicing their job interview skills, and there's live people helping them from 3 to or 12 to 9 p.m., for those Job Help Now resources. So check out the library's website. There's a lot of different resources, and please refer people to our website. We have a lot of different places for people to start, or just have them go to one of their local libraries and they can start their journey there, and we can make sure that they get started at the right place for where they're at in their job seeking cycle.
Scott, I want to kick it back to you. It's been a while since we heard from you. So you talked earlier about sort of the disparities in how the levels of whether students have access at home to desktop computers, tablets, or just smartphones. How does that sort of disparity affect the instruction, and how do you sort of target, hey, we need to introduce students to iPads or desktop computers?
Honestly, I mean, I don't know that it affects the instruction so much as the way we teach affects the devices. I think that one of the things I was thinking about before we came up here was, our like I said earlier, our juniors and seniors have iPads at the high school, because when they started the one-to-one program before I got to South San, that was what everyone was buying, was iPads. After a couple of years, we reevaluated, and we actually handed students, a new iPad and a new Chromebook, and asked them which device you preferred, and the students overwhelmingly preferred the Chromebook. At the high school level, especially because we have, early college students, we have students that are doing dual credit, we have students that are going to St. Philip's and Palo Alto to take classes, and they need that device that has a keyboard attached that's more, kind of business geared. But I think back to the point of what device, it doesn't matter what device. Kids are, it's interesting hearing about the adult education side of things, because the things that we're teaching adults about, you know, how to use Word and PowerPoint and sign up for an email account and things like that are things that I was teaching my tech apps kids 15 years ago. What we're teaching kids at the elementary and middle school and high school level today is more how to think, how to use these devices to really wonder outside the box. Kids aren't afraid of a device. They're gonna, you know, they're gonna pick up the mouse and figure it out. Kids aren't afraid to break stuff. That's the great thing. You know, you hand a kid a device, and within 5 minutes, they're gonna figure out how to use it. They may not know the best way to use that to get the job done they want to get done, but they're going to figure out the interface pretty quickly because they're just going to start messing with it and figure that piece out. But the education side that we have to do is really about you know, education about what you put online, what are you able to do online, discerning between fact and fiction, discerning between fact and opinion. You know, especially in the news climate, I say news, you know, in quotes, a climate today, you really have to teach kids how to discern between what's true factual information and what somebody just threw out there because they could, you know, sign up for a WordPress page. I might be dating myself by using WordPress. But you know, I mean, I think that's really what it gets to. You know, any device we throw at a kid, they're going to be able to use. They do have some preferences, and we do try to listen to those preferences. I still feel like at the elementary level, the kinder, first, second grade level, that tactile, that touch screen is really something that kids are used to. But when they get to the older levels, they don't really have that much problem picking up a mouse. Just as a quick aside, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. My 12-year-old, when she first started using a computer, you know, again in quotes, when she was probably 3 years old, she knew how to manipulate a trackpad on a laptop. My now 9-year-old, the first time I set a laptop in her lap, she poked at the screen. It didn't have a touch screen, but that's how she knew how to interface with it. And so that 3-year gap makes a big difference in the way kids interact with devices. You know, I have a touch screen laptop. Ask me how many times I actually touch the screen on my touch screen. I almost never do unless the trackpad stops working. So, you know, like I said, the device doesn't really matter. Kids are going to use what they're going to use, and they are very adaptable. They'll move from a smartphone to a tablet to a laptop and back, all in the same breath. Adults, I think, are the ones that have the bigger learning curve or issue with, you know, adults are afraid to break stuff, I think.
Can I jump in just real quick? Sure. I think you touched on this a little bit, Scott, that I heard somebody saying on the National Digital Inclusion Alliance conference, they said, like, there is no digital native. Sometimes we talk about kids, oh, they have phones, they know computers, they are native. Like, no, there's this concept, like, let's stop talking about it because they know how to manipulate the phones for, I don't know, Snapchat, Facebook, and all stuff, but they don't know what else they can do with it. So, and that's what our job is really to expose the kids. It's like, how can you use technology to do more, right? Do you know you can code and make a video game? Do you know you can open your business? You know, my kids all really want to be a YouTuber right now. Apparently that's makes a lot of money. But, you know, so what else? Like, it's really, I think the training, when we talk about digital inclusion in general for kids and adults, is really helping them realize that technology is not about the technology, it's about what you do with technology and how can you leverage that for your goals in education, employment, to have fun, and whatever it is. But then the fact that the device that you use matters for certain things, right? The phone is great for you to be a consumer of information. It's not good for you to be a producer. You try to apply for a job on your phone or write a resume or do homework. It's not going to, technology is not there yet. Maybe we'll be there eventually. But so that's why at the San Antonio Housing Authority, we only focus on laptop, desktops, and sometimes we do give tablets, but we prefer laptops because the device that you provide to the community matters. And, you know, our goal is not just to give them a phone so they can consume information, but to give them a device and the training and the broadband so they can really leverage technology to help them in their overall goals.
Yeah, and one of the things that you touched upon there was the device that people use. I try to, like when I'm in meetings with teachers, when I'm at meetings at central office, I try to use my phone for a lot of that because I want to be able to see what is that kid who only has the phone, what is their experience when they're getting into this teacher's Google Classroom or doing something that the teacher has assigned, and this is the only device that they have at their available to them. And bringing that to the attention of the adults in the room, saying, hey, look, you may say it's just XYZ, but try doing it on this and see what it feels like for that kid who's at home trying to do your homework, and maybe this is the only screen they have to look at.
I wanted to ask a follow-up question. Scott mentioned one-to-one initiatives, and this is the concept that every student should have a device. They were rolled out at districts all over the country 8 or 9 years ago. I remember being a cub reporter and covering that. But other than you kind of alluded to some of the findings from that. What else have we learned from one-to-one initiatives?
I think, from our perspective, it's great if every kid has a device. It certainly it levels the playing field as far as being able to have an expectation of our teachers to provide instruction that takes place in a 21st century classroom as opposed to sitting there with a book in their lap. It's also allowed us as a district to move forward from purchasing hardcover textbooks and move toward more digital resources. So it's not really. I don't think it's a game changer as far as direct student impact, but it's a game changer as far as the dollars we spend and where we spend them, and then being able for every student to have a certain level of expectation. The expectation used to be kids come to school with pencil and a paper. Now the expectation is they come to school with a device. Maybe if we did a bring your own device, there's a lot of districts that moved to that after they saw how expensive iPads were. You don't have a level playing field there because every kid has a different device. Some kids have an iPhone, some kids have an Android, some kids, God forbid, still have a BlackBerry. Some of them have an older iPhone that may not be able to be updated and run the latest iOS, packages. You just level the playing field when you give every kid a device. But as far as, I just completely lost my train of thought. God, I hate when that happens. So I think though, as far as closing a digital divide and allowing kids, the freedom to be able, it just allows us to be able to say here's what the expectation is. You're going to bring this device. This is where I was going with that. At our elementary campuses, we actually have 2 of our 9 elementary campuses are doing a blended learning pilot this year, and we decided as a department not to go one-to-one at those campuses. We did not provide them the devices that would allow them to have a single device for each kid. And the reason for that is because we want the kids to collaborate. We want them to work together. And so if we had provided every single kid with a device, then what you get is every single kid sitting in front of their device and they're not talking, they're not collaborating. And at the elementary level especially, there's got to be a lot of back and forth. And so we provided the classrooms with enough devices to have a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 depending on the grade level. And so the teachers are kind of forced to change that mindset of, oh no, every kid's going to have a device, to I've got to plan something where the kids can work cooperatively, because that's the way work works these days. You've got to be able to work with other people.
Sorry,
I think we had
comment.
a question. Yeah.
So Scott, maybe if you could just expand a little bit on part of the challenge that took place with the one-to-one push is the integration of an LMS system where there was true foundation around leveraging those devices to access specific content related to education. And I think that's one thing that there was a big miss on when that initially came out was, yeah, let's get devices out in all the kids' hands, but we really have no plan around how to leverage that device to really put them at an advantage.
Right, and I think that happened in a lot of districts. They're like, oh, we got to give kids devices, and then they didn't. there's a lot of money spent on hardware and not a lot of money spent on training, and that's what it comes down to. There's got to be professional development on the other side, and even if it's not necessarily a learning management system, but just getting everybody on the same page as far as what's expected of the teachers, and what's the expectation of the student use of those devices. And so when Google Classroom came out, it was fantastic for us because it's free. We're already a Google Suite district. And so that provided kind of a foundation level. I know I was in Schertz-Cibolo before, a couple of districts before South San, and we used Moodle, which was a free open source thing, but we had a heck of a time getting teachers on board with it because it was complicated and clunky and it wasn't easy to use. Google Classroom was really easy to use. We're still facing those challenges as far as getting every kid into the right systems, because every textbook manufacturer has their own data system that they like Pearson has a completely different set of data upload standards than McGraw-Hill does. And so we're still struggling through some of that. It's getting better. There's been a lot of push from technology directors and districts around the country for textbook manufacturers and content providers to provide kind of a unified platform. And so we're seeing more of that happening. We're just launching the use of Clever in our district, which is a single sign-on portal where we provide data to Clever and then they provide our data out to the different content providers. And so that allows a jumping off point. It allows kind of consistency across the district too, as far as getting into the different programs and things that we use.
We've got another question from the audience.
Yeah, it might be more of a comment than a question. I'm at UTSA. I'm head of the downtown campus library. And UTSA, this goes back to the question of information literacy and upward mobility. We lose a lot of our first-year students. We have trouble with retention. We have trouble with them coming in unprepared. And a lot of them are trying to get through college just using their phones, and that's not going to work. Now, obviously, the library provides computers for them to work on. Our website now counts the number that are available at any 1 minute, because it's sometimes really hard for them to find an available computer. One of the ways we're trying to facilitate their success at UTSA is we're pushing open access textbooks. We're trying to get the faculty to switch to open access textbooks. Books are incredibly expensive, and we know that that's an obstacle to staying at UTSA. And again, they need devices, and devices that they can use that are fast enough, that can access the textbooks now online. But we're also discovering, as you guys were saying, they tell us that they are competent on the computers. They're not. They're not. They don't understand what a database is. We do the same instruction about how do you evaluate information. I don't know what the answer is in terms of getting them devices at that level. They get a break at the campus computer store, but still we're talking a few $100s for available devices.
Yeah, can just quick comment on that?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I was saying, for the device question, the things most people don't know, or maybe everybody knows by now, is that Connect Home, when we were launched, there was no money, right? It's a federal government program, and great, you sign up to be Connect Home, you're on your own. And I would say for the long term, that turned out to be a good thing. One is that now we're not in the jeopardy of getting our budget cut because there's no budget. and then two is that it really allow us to really build partnerships, and really that's what this panel is all about. So, partnerships and for training, and we can refer people to go to different libraries and different sites and community room, bibliotech. But then for the device piece, it was really, I felt San Antonio were really unique that we have such an embracing community. So when Connect Home was launched, I was going out and talking to anybody, and it's like, hey, do you have computers? Donate your old computers. Let's find a refurbisher so we can, supply the need of a device. So with the San Antonio Housing Authority in terms of college, we have the education investment program that provides scholarships to our residents in public housing Section 8. So now, me as Connect Home, I'm looking, how can I make sure that our scholarship participants have the skills and the tools to be successful as they go to start college. So again, we provide the training, and we talk about a little bit on fake news. So our training is over there, Natalie, so we always review the curriculum, but fake news and how to, format a document, how to navigate online, and we also, with the partnership with Goodwill and everybody else, Frost Bank and Wells Fargo, USAA, and all the donations of devices also and funds, we're able to provide those devices to our residents to make sure that they have all the tools to be successful, especially in higher ed.
I think we have one more question here.
Yes, so I was wondering, I've been listening today, and I know obviously this whole focus is about increasing access, which is hugely important, but I think both for adults and children, I'm curious what y'all are talking about with them with regards to sort of healthy tech habits, not just discerning what is real and fake, but also sort of how long you're online, what that does to your mental health, what that does to sort of your relationships. Has that been something y'all have been exploring at all?
So we do some digital literacy far too late, because we start kind of in junior high, when that really should be starting probably at the first and second grade level, talking about screen time and how often kids are online, and really, I mean, if you think about it, it even goes back to, pre-computer times, is how much TV are kids watching when they get home, that kind of thing. My 9-year-old would prefer to go home and watch YouTube videos than read a book. So I've got to, put the thing away. I turn off the Wi-Fi sometimes. Get out your book, and you're going to read for 20 or 30 minutes. And getting that home to hitting that home to parents too, about how important that is, and telling them at a young age that the tablet or the device is just like the TV was not a babysitter. This should not be a babysitter either. And talking about those kind of healthy habits. But then at the middle school level, especially, we get into a lot of that's where we start to see a lot of the cyberbullying and the other stuff that goes on that that we don't really like to talk about with kids on phones, and taking private pictures on a public device and that kind of thing. So we do some of that. We clearly don't do enough, and like I said, I would think we should start at a much younger grade level than we do.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, at the library, I think we do have a phased-in approach. So we obviously start from maybe even before birth if you're reading to your child while you're still pregnant. So we do, in our story times, kind of particularly focus on just doing picture books and hands-on activities, early literacy, definitely with the focus of doing that storytelling whether it's oral or with books. And we very rarely bring in tablets, occasionally here and there, but because research has shown us that young minds do better with physical books than they do with digital content. And I know that there's additional research, and I'll be super excited to see how that continues to expand as we move more and more digital, but we do have some research that shows that people remember things better when they write it down or when they're reading it from a physical book than they do with a digital book. So we definitely keep that in mind as we implement different programs at the library. I think just again in preparing for the future, we are definitely continuing to look at our communities. We just did a big survey to kind of pull in feedback about digital literacy skills. The gap is still very prominent. I left a little card here. We do this every year to kind of, we are a city department. The San Antonio Public Library System is a city department working for our residents throughout all of the districts. This is a community impact card that we do every budget to kind of show the impact that we have in our communities through our different 30 locations. As you can see, our need for computers is still very high. We have over 2.5 million hours of computer sessions a year that happen through our libraries. So if you can imagine, that's a lot of people visiting us on a daily basis. Our labs are always very full. using our broadband and our Wi-Fi. So the demand is still very, very high. Even when we researched and did a little bit of surveying of our staff, as we again continue to go more digital, we need to be cognizant of our digital literacy skills of our staff. So as we incorporate new methods, and it could be something, Scott, that you're experiencing at the schools too, we keep pushing things to go digital and our staff are not ready. We need to make sure that they're ready, that they're trained, so that when people come in and want the help or support, that they can also feel comfortable in doing so as well. So it's something that the library is looking at to do more of, training of our staff and bringing them along with us as we continue to incorporate a little bit more digital services and programs at the library.
Before we close here, and we open it up to potentially more questions, I wanted to clarify something earlier. Before the president co-opted the term fake news and used it to jeer media organizations that were providing unfavorable, or what he believes is unfavorable coverage, it was perfectly legitimate to use the word fake, or the term fake news, because there are literal trolls pushing false narratives to try and sway and manipulate the public. So I just wanted to make that point before we move on. Does anyone else have any questions? And let's give him a mic. Okay.
We are streaming, so using the mic helps.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm Jose de la Vega, Enterprise Security Architect for CPS Energy, and also retired Navy. That said, I haven't heard anything about the military yet. Have any of the branches reached out as far as training, help, that interaction? I mean, that's a big piece here for San Antonio. Have we taken advantage of that, on both sides? Them reaching out to you guys, or you guys out to them? Because they do a lot of community service within the city, so I was just wondering if that was one small aspect of.
Amazingly, we don't do a lot. I mean, Lackland is in our backyard. When you saw on that map earlier, the big red spot there was a blue spot right in the middle, and that's Lackland Air Force Base, and they actually border our school district, and we really don't have a lot of contact with them as far as programs in the campuses other than ROTC. We do have a Cyber Patriot program at the high school. A lot of high schools have that. They go through that competition, and they do some cybersecurity things of that nature with our high school students. But as far as bringing in devices from them, we have some folks that come onto our campuses and help with that piece of it, with the Cyber Patriot part. But as far as bringing devices in from the Air Force or whatever, we don't see that a whole lot of that, except like I said, except in the ROTC program.
And I think that's our time. Okay, so I think our next on our agenda is getting lunch ready, and then we will have a lunch session with our planning tri-chairs. So if we want to take the opportunity to take a quick break and then get ready for lunch. Lunch is sandwiches, so if you guys want to, the same place where the breakfast was served.